meeting to order. This meeting of July 23rd. We'll note that all commissioners are present. Are there any changes to the order of business? Hearing none, would there be a motion to approve the order of business?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The motion carries. The next item then is the consent agenda. There are two items on the consent agenda. Is there anything there you would like to discuss?
Mr. President, I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
We have the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Olmans?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. So the motion carries. That brings us to the non-timetable agenda, or tab 4, and the first item that we have there is to hear the financial report. Mrs. Johnson.
Good evening, Mr. President, Commissioners. I would like to highlight a few items from the financial report through June. We'll begin with our general fund report. With half of the year completed, our property taxes equal $3.2 million, and we're 98% collected compared to budget. Our other taxes and fees, which include things like financial institution tax and franchise fees, is 69% collected compared to budget. Our intergovernmentals include revenues we receive from the state and local governments, and is 41% collected compared to budget. Our licenses, fees, and services, which include building permit revenues and oil royalties, is 50% collected compared to budget. Our building permit revenue is up $280,000 over last year. This category also includes our municipal court fines, which are $116,000 more than last year, $27,000 of which is from overweight truck fines, which began in 2012. Our sales of city lots and equipment, we have sold $1 million of city lots through June. And our total general fund revenues equal $6.9 million, and we're 61% collected compared to budget. Our general fund expenses are broken down into groups. They include general government, which includes our administration, court, finance, and buildings and sites, and is 55% expended compared to budget. This overage is due mostly to timing. Our public safety, which includes police and fire, is 51% expended compared to budget. Our engineering and streets is 47% expended compared to budget. And our cultural services, which includes the museum and forestry, is 36% expended compared to budget. Our total general fund expenses equal $5.8 million through June, and we're 50% expended compared to budget. In our enterprise funds, our water and wastewater fund revenues equal $4.8 million through June, and we're 75% collected compared to budget, and 74% more than last year. This increase in revenue is mostly due to bulk water sales. Our expenses and capital outlays total $4.4 million, which is 83% expended compared to budget. $1.1 million of this is for the wastewater treatment plant. And our solid waste fund revenue is $1.7 million through June, which is 60% collected compared to budget, and 33% more than last year. Our large increase is mostly attributed to added commercial accounts. Our expenses and capital outlays total $1.4 million, which is 52% expended compared to budget. In our sales tax reports, the 1% sales tax fund, we received $463,000 of revenue in June, which is up 51% for the year. Our 1% sales tax is broken down into three segments, and I've added slides to show the revenues and expenses in each of these. In our 50% share, we transfer 50% of the total revenue received to the Street Projects Fund. This transfer occurs at year-end. The transfer in 2012 is budgeted to be $2.6 million. The second is the 20% share, which is for job creation and senior programs. This segment funds Stark Development, Elder Care, and RSVP subsidies, along with the Senior Citizen and Southwest Regional Grant programs. And our third segment is the 30% share, which is set aside for capital improvements. The expenses here include part of the BAC pledge payment and the funding for the animal shelter. I wanted to show these segments separately to show that while the 50% share transfers all of its funds, the 20% and 30% have growing cash balances which can be used for future projects. In our 0.5% sales tax, we received $231,000 in revenue in June, which is also up 51% for the year. Our expenses include the payment for the West River Community Center bond. In the hospitality tax, we received $98,000 of revenue in June, which is up 49% over last year. Our expenses include $1 million for the Badlands Activity Center pledge payment and $155,000 paid to the airport and Parks and Rec for their one-time subsidies. Our occupancy tax breakdown shows the revenues totaled $74,000 in June, which is up 82% over last year. Our expenses include $165,000 paid to the CVB for their subsidy and $60,000 for the special events grant. Our street projects report, we received $72,000 in revenue, and we have expended $536,000 towards those projects through June. And the Development Impact Fee Program, which is broken down into residential and commercial components, has a balance of $369,000 that's available for commitment at the end of June. I've also included reforecast information for our general fund, our water wastewater fund, and our solid waste fund for 2012. These spreadsheets show the revenue and expense lines that I have reforecasted from the 2012 budget and a note on the actuals we received so far. In our general fund, our revenues are estimated to be $940,000 more than budgeted. The largest increases can be found in our state aid distribution, which is a percentage of state sales tax based on census population figures. Our building permit revenue, which is 200% more than last year's record year. And our administrative fees, which were increased to 8% of reforecasted revenue in our enterprise funds. Our expenses in the general fund are in line with budget through June, and we expect no major increases from what was budgeted.
Do you expect any decreases in the general fund expenses?
We have seen some in our payroll line, but we have seen some increases in some of our others, so right now we're tracking exactly at 50%.
So they kind of offset then?
Exactly.
Okay.
Our water and wastewater fund, our revenues are estimated to be $2.2 million more than budgeted. Our largest factor is the bulk water sales, which have collected over $1.5 million through June. I've also estimated an increase in our water consumption. On the expense side, I've estimated an increase in water cost equal to the increase in consumption, and increased admin fees paid to the general fund to reflect 8% of the reforecasted revenue. These changes all reflect an increase in net revenue of $1.8 million. And in our solid waste fund, our revenues are estimated to be $285,000 more than budgeted. The largest factor is our commercial landfill revenue, which includes oil field waste. I've also increased the admin fees paid to the general fund to 8% of reforecasted revenues. The total increase in net revenue is estimated at $97,000. And those are some of the highlights of the financial statements. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mrs. Johnson, in the water fund, you mentioned we have $1.1 million of expenses for the wastewater treatment plant. Would that be primarily engineering fees then?
I believe so.
And we didn't budget that, did we, to that fund? We probably budgeted as a project, but...
Right, we budgeted as a project. Okay. And we did budget somewhere, I believe, close to $1 million, but not, we are already over that budget line.
Right, okay. Any other questions?
Mrs. Johnson, a question on the fees and permits. I think I heard you say we're at 50% for the year.
Yes.
Building permit fees, et cetera.
Correct.
So, you know, we're right on track from a calendar basis. Do you feel like that's going to end up at about 100%? Or
it'll end up quite a bit over. That also includes our administrative fees, and we only transfer those at year end.
Okay.
So we'll end up quite a bit over the 100%.
Okay. But the 50% would be on track for what is budgeted and the expenses that are supposed to come out of those.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Now, would there be a motion to accept the financial report?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Go to item B. Which is Energy Infrastructure and Impact Grant Application. And Mr. Kessel, you're going to introduce that?
Thank you, President Johnson. Commission, to this Energy Impact Grant was a pilot project related to daycare. The state is trying to incent more daycare positions within the state, especially in western North Dakota. They've done so by putting a pool of grant funds available, approximately $500,000, and then made those funds available to expansions or the creation of new daycare facilities. We have had an entity in the city of Dickinson called Kinder Kids indicate an interest in this daycare expansion. They have a 13,000 square foot building right now. They only occupy 9,000 square feet of that structure. They would like to expand into the remaining 4,000 square feet and renovate that space. Right now, it's being used as storage and garage space, but it could be easily transferred into daycare facilities. They would estimate that the expansion could include up to 50 to 63 more children could be serviced, and they would have to, of course, add staff to accommodate that many new kids. They would build between 2 and 5 new rooms, service rooms, restrooms, and a outside play area for all to service again all of those children. Kinder Kids is located right now south of Walmart. I think that's the easiest way to explain the general area, 161 21st Street West. I have spoke with the current owner of Kinder Kids, Jennifer Mosier. She is very interested in doing this project. The caveat is the city would act as a pass-through, but the caveat that the grant requires is that we actually own the building. And this is kind of a stumbling block that the grant is having in numerous cases, not just inside the city of Dickinson, but inside the state of North Dakota. I have had conversations with Jerry Fisher from the State Oil and Gas Impact Fund, and they're not exactly sure how this will impact grant or application submissions. Currently, buying the property from Kinder Kids and the city owning that 4,000 square feet isn't an issue. The difficult part is conveying that property back to Kinder Kids or Miss Mosier. That is something we'll have to figure out, assuming that we're awarded this grant prior to acceptance, is how to get that property back in the hands of Miss Mosier when the renovations are complete. So that summarizes the project, and I'd love to take questions. There's no action that the commission needs to take as of right now, but if they do award these dollars, that the city commission will have to accept them at some point, or deny them, of course.
So how do you envision this transaction working if the city is to buy 4,000 square feet of this building? Do you have a price in mind, and how long would the city have that money tied up? And
Yeah, it's an excellent question, President Johnson. I've had discussions with Attorney Coling on how to do that. My hope was we buy it for $1, we transfer it back for $1. That doesn't appear to work because that doesn't, if we own property, the only way we can divest ourselves of that is to sell it on the open market, take bids, because it's going to have a value of over $100,000. I've asked if we can buy it for that amount and then hold that money in trust, and then simply, have it bought dollar for dollar. The hard part, again, is the bid process, because anybody technically can buy that building from us. So it is a stumbling block. I don't have a great answer for you today, but we keep searching for a method to return that building to Kinder Kids.
How are other communities utilizing these funds? Because they're obviously coming up against the same roadblocks that we are, and can't think of any city-owned daycare anywhere, but what have you found?
Commissioner Altman, I was actually at the land board meeting when the governor presented this project, and that was the main concern that was brought up. His vision was to have mostly new facilities funded by this pilot project, where they would bring in pre-designed spaces, almost like a mobile home, and drop them into a community that needs these types of services. So in that case, the city would then own that property and find an operator to provide the services in that building. That was kind of the vision and the thought process. And speaking to Mr. Fisher, I'm not sure how well that will be accepted across the state. He has his concerns as well, that communities simply aren't going to want to be in the daycare providing business.
Would this grant pick up what percentage of their cost?
It's a 50/50 grant up to $125,000. So we've applied for the $125,000. Kinder Kids has said that they will pay the rest because part of their cost that they estimate the reconstruction includes pieces of the 9,000 square feet. So they would have to use funds separate from matching dollars and the grant dollars to renovate that section of the building. Now, they certainly are open to go to start development or find other financial resources to make that match, but it is a dollar for dollar 50% match.
Now, would you have a purchase agreement when you're buying this? When the city buys it, would it be a purchase agreement where you could have a stipulation that it has to be sold?
Commissioner Dukart, we're going to do everything in our power before you have to make a decision on acceptance of the grant to make sure that Kinder Kids is protected as best we possibly can. And in the end, it'll have to be a decision between Kinder Kids and the city if we have adequate protections to make sure that that property can get transferred back. But how we're going to do that, how we're going to convey that today, I don't have a good answer for you.
Maybe Becky can help us.
I was involved in the preliminary discussions between Mr. Kessel and Attorney Colling, and I think he summarized the issue adequately. We're still searching through the code and searching for other options, but I don't have a good answer for you either, and neither does Matt at this point.
Because I know with the contingency, that would be your way out for sure, or if you specified has to, in the event that the city purchases it, it has to be sold to someone in the daycare business. That would also keep you from buying something that you can't resell to that particular individual or for that particular purpose.
And I'm not sure, Commissioner Dukart, if we have that kind of flexibility in our bidding laws to make those kind of restrictions. It's certainly, we're going to, like I say, do our best to try and convey and provide confidence that it will go back to Kinder Kids, but as of today, we don't know how to do that.
And we certainly need daycare.
Yes.
Any other comments, questions? No actions required then?
Not until acceptance is contemplated.
Okay. We'll go to item C then, and this is a liquor license application for Players Sports Bar and Grill. And Mr. Kessel, would you introduce this item also?
Thank you, President Johnson. But you have before you a request for a restaurant liquor license on behalf of Players Sports Bar and Grill LLC. It is, I think on your agenda, it does say RIM Investors, Scott Wax. Mr. Wax is an investor in Players Sports Bar and Grill LLC, but the liquor license would not be issued to RIM Investors. It would be issued to Players Sports Bar and Grill LLC. We have done background checks on all of the investors, which are Dave Bren, Scott Wax, Wayne Rao, and the Autumn Fisher Trust. The trustee for the Autumn Fisher Trust is Christina oh, I'm sorry, I forgot her last name, but I believe it's Christina Fisher, but, so those are the four. We've done the appropriate background checks, and they all are found to be able to hold a liquor license. The restaurant license, or liquor license type is unlimited, so there is no limits on the number of licenses we can issue. So it is our recommendation that the City Commission issue a restaurant license to Players Sports Bar and Grill LLC.
Mr. Kessel, I have a question. If I recall correctly, this license class requires that restaurant sales exceed 50% of the total sales.
That's correct, President Johnson. They have to be at least 50% of all of gross sales. And we do require that a sworn statement be issued by the owners and by the accountant or financial advisor to the company.
And that's on an annual basis as the renewal for the liquor license comes up annually.
That is correct. Yes, they have to meet that standard every year.
Is there a representative of this group here? Would one of you be comfortable in coming to the podium and, just, I guess, give us reassurance that in your business model, you feel your restaurant sales will be greater than your bar sales?
Yes, my name is Wayne Rao, and I am one of the owners that Sean spoke of. I'm actually been pretty experienced in this type of business, and I'm actually expecting about between 70 and 65% of our sales will be food sales.
Okay.
About 30 to 35 will probably, on average, be about our liquor sales.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rao. While he's here, does anybody have another question for him? All right.
I guess for a comparison, this is Applebee's like, for lack of a better comparison.
I wish you wouldn't have used that.
The premise and
The premises is Applebee's ground round type bar and grill, yes.
okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on this matter?
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner?
move to approve the application as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Olmans?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. We have a second item there. This is a men's den salon. And Mr. Kessel, would you introduce it also?
Thank you, President Johnson. This also is a liquor license. Mr. Corey Branson has applied and paid for a beer and wine license. Again, these are not limited under our current code, and this is for on-sale sales only. This is not for off-sale purposes, and they, of course, are limited, as the title infers, to simply the sales of beer and wine on the premises. The idea behind the Men's Den is it is a place you can get your hair cut. It is focusing, as the name implies, on men, and their intent is to have TVs that you can watch sports and other things of interest to males. It is going to be located on 15th Street in the Prairie Hills subdivision. A background check was completed on Mr. Branson, and there are no issues or blemishes that would prevent the issuance of this type of a license to the Men's Den Salon and Corey Branson as the owner. With that background check complete, we would recommend that this license be issued.
I have a question. Would this then mean that underage customers couldn't be customers of, go in and get a haircut?
I guess I'd refer to our attorney, Ms. Grant, but I believe they can still come in, they just couldn't participate in that portion of the experience.
I believe that's true.
I guess that's no different than a bowling alley, is it, that, where kids can go in and bowl and yet they can serve beer there?
City of Bismarck actually had a similar issue where salons in that community were offering wine and such to their customers, but doing it without a license. So I actually commend Mr. Branson for obtaining a license or attempting to obtain a license prior to operations. And I don't believe it will contradict any of our current ordinances.
Mr. President, if you like, I could add to it. They had not this particular one, but one similar to this in Kansas City, and how they dealt with it, they would check you, and if you were underage, they would offer you a pop or whatever. So I presume that's probably the same operation that they have here. I've been to it in Kansas City, and it's a unique concept, and I think in a community like ours, it will probably be well received.
Thank you, Mr. Cardon. Any other comments, questions?
When we do these background checks, what are examples of concerns that might sway us to question the issuance of the license?
I would actually ask that our Police Chief Dossinger come up. The police department does the background checks primarily. We look for any liquor-related violations, DUIs, things that would elevate themselves to a level of concern. I'll let Chief Dossinger speak to that directly.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the commission. We look for any criminal violations of a felony in nature, any previous alcohol violations, particularly providing alcoholic beverages to minors, and so forth. We also look at any criminal driving records pertaining to DUI arrests in the past.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions?
Mayor Johnson, is Mr. Branson here?
Is Mr. Branson present?
Okay. So,
Anything else?
I'd like to follow up, Mr. President. Chief, so the local history versus the criminal history here is not a concern?
Your question is if the local history?
Yes.
We also run the local history. as
Okay, and
well.
I see there's a local history here. Are we having any concerns with that for this?
Yeah, and that's been forwarded to the attention of you guys, the commission. That's a pending charge. Hasn't been formally convicted of it. It's a pending charge for,
It's one pending charge.
exactly.
Okay.
On three, there were 3 reports in reference to that.
3 reports for the one
Yes,
charge.
correct. And maybe Becky can comment on that if that's been forwarded to her office.
I can't recall off the top of my head if this particular case is pending with our office or not.
If there were a conviction here, would that be considered a felony?
This one would be, no, it would not be a felony conviction.
Mr. President, it'd be a Class B misdemeanor, which is the lowest level of misdemeanor in North Dakota.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Would there be a motion regarding this item?
I'll move we approve, Mr. President.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have the motion, the second, further discussion. Okay, we'll proceed to vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Ullman?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. Thank you, Chief. It's 5 o'clock, and we do have 2 timetable items. The first one is to hear a municipal court report, and Mr. Kessel, do you want to introduce, we've got you down as Becky Weldon, but I believe it's Becky Grant now, or is it Is it, okay. Or do you go by both names?
I was just recently married, so Grant is my new name.
Grant, okay. Well, sometimes keep your other name for professional purposes. You didn't do that.
I didn't.
Oh, okay, good. So, well, I just got here.
Well, President Johnson, the name change did become official in between the memo writing and today, so I was confused as well for a little while. But Becky Grant does sit in for Attorney Colling in his absence. He's on vacation, if I'm not mistaken, this week, so he's enjoying some time away with his family. Ms. Grant does in charge of specifically of our municipal court prosecution services and took that contract over this year. So she has a report on how the progress of those items.
Mr. President, City Commissioners, as Mr. Kessel just said, my name is Becky Grant. I'm currently working under City Attorney Matthew Colling in managing the municipal prosecution contract. The purpose of the memorandum that we have submitted in this presentation is to update you all on the status of the contract as we close on the second quarter of our prosecution. If you have any questions as I go through the slides, please go ahead and jump in. As you all are aware, we began prosecuting for the City of Dickinson on January 1st, 2012. The last quarterly report presentation was before this commission on April 16th, 2012. Currently, we have opened and prosecuted approximately 500 files. As we discussed during my last quarterly report presentation, the landscape of criminal activity continues to change in Dickinson. This slide offers a comparison between the amount of criminal citations between 2011 and 2012 for the months of April, May, and June.
Ms. Grant, when you talk about the criminal violations or citations, what is the majority of those citations for?
It's hard to give you a percentage of what of those citations is under which category, but mostly our cases involve DUIs, driving under suspension, domestic violence, and disorderly conduct charges.
Thank you.
Along with a greater number of citations being written and prosecuted comes a greater amount of fines and fees. This slide again offers a comparison between 2011 and 2012 for the months of April, May, and June. Just as a matter of refreshing the Commissioner's memories, we continue to handle municipal prosecution matters by appearing in court 3 times per week. On Monday morning, we are in district court for ledger card hearings. These hearings are meant to address defendants that haven't complied with the terms of their sentence, meaning that they haven't paid their fines or they haven't served their jail time, etc. On Tuesday afternoon, we're in district court again for pretrial hearings. And the reason we're in district court rather than municipal court is that defendant has requested a jury trial. So if there's that request made, then it's automatically transferred up to district court. On Thursday morning, we're in municipal court for pretrial hearings and arraignments. And on Thursday afternoon, all our municipal court bench trials are scheduled.
Ms. Graham,
Yes.
over here.
I'm sorry.
There was a recent change in the law that occurred regarding cases that were brought to district court out of municipal court, and then essentially they were, I hate to use the term, judge shopping, and then if they could be brought back to municipal court. Could you maybe speak to that a little bit?
I will if you give me just a couple slides. I have a slide on that one as well.
Okay.
Thus far, in 2012, we prosecuted 9 bench trials. 2 additional trials have been set. There is one set for this Thursday and another one set for early August. We are currently handling 2 cases that were appealed to district court after we obtained convictions in municipal court bench trials. In our last report, we provided information regarding the remand process that our firm initiated upon taking over municipal prosecution matters. The remand process involves municipal cases that were transferred up to district court upon the request for a jury trial. And if that request for a jury trial was subsequently waived as a result of a negotiated plea agreement, we have required the case to be sent back down to municipal court. And the reason for that is that we are ensuring that the fines and fees associated with those cases remain with the City of Dickinson rather than being disposed of in the county court. So far, we have remanded 62 cases. Those remanded cases have generated $31,000, $31,745 for the City of Dickinson. Currently, there are no outstanding criminal complaint requests that have been submitted by officers that we haven't reviewed for charging determinations. In addition to criminal complaints, we've also been working with city officials on zoning enforcement matters and with Chief Sivak on fuel spill matters. Recently, we've seen an increase in complaint requests regarding extraordinary use of roadway complaints, and that involves overweight trucks proceeding through the city streets. If those citations are written and then contested, we're required to file a complaint in district court in order to recoup those fees. In July, we filed 5 complaints in district court related to collection of fines and fees for extraordinary use. And that concludes my presentation. I can take any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Ms. Grant. Currently, what is the retainer arrangement between Ebeltoft-Sickler and the City of Dickinson for prosecution services?
I believe it is $2,400 per month is the retainer, and then there's an additional non-retainer matters are billed at $185 per hour.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact amount, but that is accurate. The 185 I know is an accurate figure.
So typically, how many hours are we being billed per month for?
I don't have that information offhand, Mr. President, but I can submit some information to you on that if you'd like it.
Okay, I mean, just where I was going with the line of questioning was to get a reference to what we're currently paying for prosecution services and what we used to pay. And I know we're all very pleased with the job you're doing. Well, it's just refreshing to have you here doing that. And I was just curious what it's actually costing us now through the first 6 months. Any other questions or comments here? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's 5:10, and we do have a couple of items here regarding, I think it's rezones. And so, Mr. Cretton, can you introduce these 2 items?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. President and Commissioners, the first item is the Steffes Plan Unit Development. This is a rezone petition from Ag to Plan Unit Development for the purposes of establishing a tank storage facility located in the general area of Highway 22 and 20th Street Southwest. Steffes Corporation has been using the general vicinity over the last several years as part of their storage for tanks that are used in the oil industry, and this is a mechanism in order to bring them into compliance. With their site plan, they have shown where they would seed for grass and then also provide numerous trees as part of their application materials. The Planning and Zoning Commission and city staff recommend approval contingent upon the 7 attached conditions, and I'm available if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cretton. Are there any questions for the city planner? Mrs. Grant, is there an ordinance number for this one?
Yes, Mr. President, it's 1475.
Okay. So this would be first reading of ordinance 1475. At this time, I'd invite any members of the public that would wish to comment regarding this proposed ordinance. If you'd like to comment, please come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. Is there anybody that would wish to comment? Okay, there's no one that wishes to comment. Any comments by city commissioners?
I make a motion to approve first reading of ordinance 1475.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Olmans?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. So the motion carries. Mr. Catan, would you continue?
The next item is Rolling Hills Plan Unit Development. Before I proceed, Mr. President, I had an email earlier today. The applicants are coming from California, and they were running behind schedule, and they requested that this item could be deferred to the general Planning Commission items. If they are not here, I'd like to see if they are in attendance, because they want to give a brief presentation. You are? Okay.
Dina will be here, but she'll be about another 30 minutes to 40 minutes yet. She was just crossing the Montana border about 5 o'clock. So if we could just delay it, it'd be greatly appreciated.
It's up to you, Mr. President. If you want to delay this, we can come back to it as part of the planning agenda, or we can just move forward with it if you like.
We can delay it. So we'll just go back to the non-timetable agenda. And item D is the West Ridge Development Annexation, and I'm guessing that's yours too, Mr. Catan?
Yes, Mr. President. This is an annexation request from Larry Nygaard. This is a annexation in which only the property owner is submitting it for the West Ridge development. Recently, we've had final plats that came through, and then also we've had the rezoning for the property. The property is located in the general area of the northwestern quadrant of exit 59 or interchange 59. It's roughly 208 acres, and the applicant is requesting that this annexation would be the first reading tonight in order to move forward with the remainder of items that they need to complete. City staff would recommend approval.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Grant, what's the ordinance number on this one?
Mr. President, the next ordinance number is 1476.
1476, okay. You've heard Mr. Catan's introduction. Are there any questions for him? Not, if there's anyone from the public that would like to comment regarding this proposed ordinance on its first reading, you may do so now. Just come to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. Is there anybody that wishes to comment? There's no one that wishes to comment from the public. Any comments or questions by city commissioners? Not, is there a motion regarding ordinance 1476?
Mr. President, move to approve ordinance 1476.
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? No discussion, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. So we go to item E. This is regarding tobacco fee, and I think both Mr. Kessel and Attorney Grant will be speaking to this. So, Mr. Kessel first.
Thank you, President Johnson. The City of Dickinson has had on its books an ordinance that limits tobacco sales in an effort to try to reduce sales to minors. That product is basically we give permission to a entity to sell tobacco. We've had a great deal of people come into our community, and it appears that a permission or granting the authority to sell may not be as adequate. What we prefer to do is issue a license to sell tobacco products, almost or very similar to the same manner we issue a liquor license. So what you have before you is revisions to the current ordinance and adapting it so that the city would actually issue a license instead of authority to sell tobacco products. The thought process is there would also be a permit fee that would be required on an annual basis that you would set by resolution, but that the license could be suspended or revoked depending upon their compliance with our ordinance. So if they did sell to minors, we could hold a hearing and remove that license if they've done that on repeated occasions. What the intent would be is that we would make anybody who's selling tobacco products today comply with this ordinance come January 1. And any new businesses that would like to sell, we would make them comply, assuming that this ordinance is passed upon passage of the ordinance itself. So with that, that's my introduction. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
Where would the fees generated from this license, where would they go?
They'd stay in the general fund. They would stay in the same license category as liquor license do today.
So the first item here for our consideration is a resolution that would set the fee at $50 per year per location.
Well, you would have to set the ordinance, or create an ordinance first in order to issue the fee, because right now, we don't have a mechanism to issue a license. So we would need the ordinance in order to issue a license, and then the resolution would set the fee once you said you'd like to issue the license.
Is he correct, Mrs. Grant?
That's correct, Mr. President. In order to move forward, you would first need to pass the ordinance and then pass the resolution.
Nice try, President Johnson.
Well, I'm not done yet.
No.
Why did you list the resolution on my list of things to do here before you listed the ordinance? I'm just following your order of items. At any rate, it doesn't matter, but
Mine's different. Oh, I'm looking at my memo. Sorry, I was looking at my memo, which
Oh.
does correctly state an ordinance is in order.
so, okay. So this is ordinance, let me guess, number 1477?
That's correct, Mr. President.
All right. And has everybody here had a chance to review it?
Yes.
Mr. President, I just want to make sure I understand. The reason we're doing this is to give us some recourse with the folks who are selling tobacco. Is that why we're doing this?
Yeah, Commissioner Jackson, for multiple reasons, that's certainly one of them. We do have some recourse today via that ordinance. This would allow simply our ability to track who's been granted authority and who's been issued a license. It'd be much easier to track the license issuance, and it is we do have, Becky Bozeski's office does go back and check. They do periodic reviews to make sure people are complying with that ordinance, and we just believe that obtaining a license, when people, let me try to explain it this way. We've had several entities make an assumption that they don't need a license, so they operate without granting authority. They don't know to come to us to have the authority granted to them. They're used to having an attorney call and say, do we need a license in order to operate that business? Well, no, you don't in this case. And so we've missed some instances in the past where they should have had a license to operate, or at least authority to operate, and they've not received said authority. So we believe it'd be a lot easier to track if a license was issued and then renewed each and every year. I hope that answers your question.
And these are non-transferable.
That's correct. Yes.
And so if they have violations, the city could either not renew their license or suspend their license, and if that happened, then they could not sell tobacco products.
That's correct. And that is actually fairly typical in other cities in North Dakota.
And is this for any amount of tobacco, or is it only convenience stores, grocery stores, or is it bars or any business that would be selling any amount of tobacco in any form?
Yeah, Commissioner Altman's quantity doesn't matter. the fact that you're going to sell a tobacco product is what this would cover. So if you wanted to sell a pack of cigarettes, you would have to get a liquor license, or excuse me, a tobacco license.
Okay, this is ordinance 1477. If there's anyone from the public that would like to comment regarding this proposed ordinance, you may do so now. Just step to the podium, state your name, and hear your comments.
Thank you. Bernie Marsh, I'm with the Esquire Club in Dickinson. If a bar would have a vending machine for tobacco, does that license go to the vendor that fills it, or does that go to the bar?
I'm going to let Attorney Grant answer that question.
I can't answer that off the top of my head. I would have to look into that further.
You know, like, the old cigarette type machines, and usually the vending company that supplies the cigarettes, they take a percentage of, or they give the bar a percentage of that, and that's where my question is on that.
Who gets the violation in that case? If the bar allows an underage person to buy cigarettes from the vending machine, is it the vendor or is it the bar that gets penalized on that?
Commissioner Opens would be the license holder. So whoever holds that license, they would be the party who would be, who we would go to make sure that they're not selling to minors.
So when you guys were drafting this ordinance or these changes, did you think about vending machines, or is this a new curve here?
And no, this is a curve. I have to admit, I didn't even realize that those still existed.
I don't know if there's any around, but,
You don't have any in your business now?
I don't have them.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I thought that state law didn't allow those types of machines because they cannot be regulated on who buys them, so
Maybe there aren't any of them.
Well, Mr. Kessel, in a bar, they shouldn't be there anyway. A minor shouldn't be in a bar, so,
right.
shouldn't be.
That's a good point, too. Okay. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to comment on this proposed ordinance? Well, perhaps what we can do here, if we act favorably to pass the first reading, we can schedule, say, a public hearing, at least one public hearing before we go to second reading, so the public really gets adequate time to comment regarding this one, and also if there's anything else we've overlooked.
So I would make a motion to approve first reading of ordinance 1477.
That's correct. Is there a second?
Second?
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Jackson?
I know this probably isn't a big deal, but I just want to make sure we're accomplishing something here. We're asking businesses to apply for one more license. $50 probably isn't a big deal to most people, but I'm not convinced we're really accomplishing anything here. So between now and public hearing and next reading, maybe we can talk about that a little bit more.
Certainly, we'll come back and with a better appraisal of our reasons for a license. We'll list them out for you.
I guess I'd like to hear that.
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner?
I kind of have the same concern that Commissioner Jackson has, whether we're being reactive to this or whether it's a proactive stance on this here. And I can only see it as a reactive one because of the tobacco checks that have been done in the past few months and the violations that have occurred. Outside of that, I'm not much in favor of government becoming involved in a lot of business lives, but this I see as a reactive.
Where did the resources come from that we spend on enforcing the tobacco laws? How is that funded in our community?
Commissioner Oltmans, the city of Dickinson doesn't do the underage checks. Another entity does that.
Right.
I believe they receive funding through a grant from the state on the lawsuit settlement regarding tobacco cessation. I'm not positive about that, but I believe that's how those services are funded. And in speaking with Ms. Bezeski, those grant funds are declining, and she has suggested for the related liquor license issue that they be charged for server training. I can imagine that there'll be a time when those funds will dry up and they will no longer be able to provide that service for us, and that we'll have to take that over on our own. So this would certainly be a revenue stream to offset any costs related to that.
Because there are hard costs associated with compliance checks, no matter who funds it.
That's correct. Yeah.
No, Community Action is the one that does it, and I know that at the gas stations, you have to show your driver's license to to buy cigarettes, or grocery stores or Walmart or wherever you're getting them.
But I think that's the problem here. I think that's why they're asking for this, because some of them haven't been asking for their ID and so on. They have been serving. Therefore, the ordinance, but,
Yes, whenever there's been compliance checks, to my knowledge, there's been violations, and I think the issue here is that there's really no penalty if a merchant violates the ordinance and sells to an underage person. And what this ordinance would accomplish is that there would be consequences, and the consequences are that you'd have to appear in public, explain your actions and what you're doing to rectify that, and also possibly lose that license and then not be able to sell those products. So it actually puts some teeth into the current law enforcement efforts.
If I could add, President Johnson, if the commission would like us to, we have not written in administrative fines. That is something that we could do. So not only would you have the option to either suspend or revoke a license, but you could also then issue an administrative fine for a first offense, a second offense being higher, and a third offense be a suspension, and a fourth be a revocation. You can do those types of things depending upon how the city commission would like to respond. So we've not included that, but if you'd like us to, we certainly can. I have seen and been part of ordinances enforced in that manner.
Because right now, really, what is the ramification for getting caught selling to a minor?
Well, we do have the ability to suspend a license today, or suspend authority, excuse me. And that honestly is the biggest deterrent, because if you can't sell tobacco products for a period of a week or a month, that means your profit goes away. And those are a profitable item. So that's our biggest authority, is rescinding our authority.
Why wouldn't you model this ordinance then after our liquor license ordinance?
Are you suggesting
Well,
you'd
I
like
mean,
the...
well, I'm just asking why you wouldn't. I mean, you have, in there, you have those progressive steps of discipline for first offense, second offense, and so forth. Why wouldn't you do that here?
We certainly can. I'll be happy to include...
Well, I'm asking the question. I'm not directing you to do it.
Well, as you've heard this evening, there's been some discussion on whether or not we should even issue a license. So rather than take 2 steps forward, we thought we'd take a baby step first.
What are the wishes of the commission here? We can pass first reading, defeat first reading. We can pass first reading and say, we'll go through public hearings, think that this maybe needs more work, and by the time you get to second reading, it may look quite a bit different. Or we can just refuse to act on it tonight and say, here's our thoughts on this, come back with another draft for first reading. Those are some of our options. What would you like to do?
Mr. President, a little more discussion on this. One of my, I shouldn't say concerns, but one of the things I'm looking down the line on this here is that if Becky's funds are drying up and we implement this here, at what point does she come in and ask for funds that are raised off the fees here, and now it becomes a greater expense on our end because she's going to ask for funds, which probably we get, but then we have our staff here addressing those problems. Now we're talking of an expense that we don't have now. So are the fees going to have to be raised? I think that's things we got to ask ourselves.
I would think the natural progression is that at some point, she's going to need to come in and ask for a revenue stream regardless. So implementing a revenue stream that we can build up to this point, then we are being proactive rather than reactive, as you said earlier. And then we do have a mechanism to keep the compliance checks in place, and then you have a mechanism that has some teeth in it if there's violations. So I would say you're covering all the steps moving forward.
If I may, Commissioner Steiner, the administrative license fee, $50, I think, is what Commissioner Jackson used as an example, could be retained by the city, and any progressive discipline administrative fines could be remanded to that, to Ms. Bozeski's program, so that it's very clear on where those revenues go. It's an option.
I have no problem with it at all. I just
I think we got to remember, why don't we want people to smoke? I mean, lung cancer is a very big issue in our country, and I'm sure she can get grants. I'm on that. That's part of my job now. I think issuing grants is the way to go, and I'm sure she can get them just because they are pushing non-smoking and starting with 14 on up, not just 18 and on up. For age
Kessler,
groups.
is there currently a application process for will there be for the license?
Commissioner Jackson, yes, there would be an application process. We'd go through a process very, very similar to the issuance of a liquor license, the background checks, the whole works. Today, it's a very informal process.
Looks like today, if you have a state license, you have the authority in Dickinson.
That's correct. And so we're not always even aware of all of the businesses that sell tobacco products.
We have a meeting tomorrow in Medora, the Community Action in general, so I can ask them what their plan is and how we're going to succeed on this.
I'm fine passing first reading tonight.
Do you need me to amend anything, or?
Why don't we just take it as it is, and we'll schedule one or a series of public hearings, and we'll go slow on this, make sure there's plenty of input in, and we just make sure we're doing a good thing. Anything else here? If you follow that recommendation, then the chair would entertain a motion to approve the first reading of 1477.
I'll move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Olmans?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. Now, since we're going to go through some public hearings and stuff like that, do we have to, maybe it'd be prudent not to act on a resolution establishing a fee just yet?
Mr. President, my understanding is in order to move forward to a second reading that we would need to pass the resolution.
We have to have it? Okay. So what is that resolution number then?
The next resolution number is 38-2012.
Okay. So in your packet, there is a resolution. As I recall, it's a pretty short resolution and just establishes that fee. Yep, like about a half page, okay? Would there be a motion regarding Resolution 38-2012?
I'll make the motion.
We have the motion to approve. Is there a second?
I have one quick question. The fee is by resolution, fine is by ordinance, or so we're working on two separate things as we move forward. So just because we approve this doesn't lock in the licensing fee. That's just the suggestion that's on the table right now.
Correct, Commissioner Oltmans. We can't actually implement the fee until we have an ordinance that supports it, so.
Right.
And we don't have that right now.
And the fine is part of ordinance, not resolution.
Correct.
Okay. Then I will second.
Okay, we have the motion to approve and the second. Other discussion?
Just for clarification, that the annual tobacco license is going to be $50 per location.
That's what it says.
Yep.
Anything else? Okay, we'll vote then. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Oltman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. Now we're going to go to item F. This is an update on the liquor license, and Mr. Kessel, you'll be introducing that.
Thank you, President Johnson. What you have before you is a resolution that supports the auctioning off of a new on- and off-sale liquor license. As we discussed at the last commission meeting, you had interest in establishing a process to do so and recognizing that the city's population has reached at least 18,000, which gives the city commission authority to issue another license, as we've stated. The process will simply be that the sealed bids would be received until Monday, August 13th at 1 o'clock Mountain Standard Time here at City Hall. At 1 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, we will open all sealed bids, and those people that submitted a bid, a written sealed bid, can improve those bids verbally after they're opened, and we will continue to receive verbal bids until a high bidder is established. Once that high bidder is established, then we'll go back and do the necessary background checks and make sure that they comply with our city ordinances. If that is the case, then a recommendation will be brought to the City Commission regarding a qualified highest bidder to issue a new on- and off-sale liquor license. This is all summarized in the resolution, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
And Mrs. Grant, the resolution number is
39-2012.
okay.
Mr. Kessel, with the bidding process, it's city staff, not city commission, that administers the bidding process, opens the bids and receives them, qualifies the bid and makes the final recommendation to city commission at that point.
Correct, Commissioner Oltmans. That is, we would more than likely hold that auction in this room, and then once we're able to establish the quantitative side or qualitative side, we would make a recommendation to this body at the following, more than likely the following City Commission meeting. You're certainly welcome to be present, but it would be a staff.
But it is a staff function.
Yes.
Okay.
Other questions or comments?
How did we arrive at the minimum dollar amount?
I did ask some recommendations of other fellow city staff. Honestly, that number is, can be changed with any, the 185 is, in talking to the industry and to city staff, that was arrived at a number that seemed to be reflective of what city licenses have been transferring for in the past. It's supposed to be a little bit on the low side because we understand that they have been transferring for more than that in the recent past.
Other comments or questions?
So one license, that's all we're doing.
That's correct.
One license, 185,000 minimum bid for that license.
Correct.
Okay.
This is not a public hearing, it's not an ordinance, but the chair has a certain amount of latitude, so at this time, if there's anybody from the public that would like to comment regarding this resolution, you may do so now. Just come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments.
Bernie Marsh, I'm with the Esquire Club downtown. Is the bid opening open to the public?
Yes.
regardless if you put in a bid or not, it's still, you can be there.
That's correct. You can't offer a verbal bid if you've not submitted a written.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
I just was wondering if you could be present.
Yep.
Any other members of the public wish to comment? Okay, I'll ask if there's any final discussion then by commissioners here. This is Resolution 39-2012.
I make a motion to approve Resolution 39-2012.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Further discussion? No other discussion, we'll vote then. Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We go to item G, staffing plan. Mr. Kessel.
Thank you, President Johnson. You were presented a staffing plan at the last City Commission meeting. It outlined the reasons for three basic recommendations. Those recommendations were to hire 2 solid waste operators and 1 fire inspector in 2012, to approve a cost of living increase of 7% as of August 1st, and to update skill-based pay and establish 3 different categories instead of the current 2. You've heard earlier this evening a report from Finance Director Johnson that reforecasted some of the revenues and expenses that we expect to happen and occur in 2012. And with that, I believe that indicates a revenue stream that would be consistently applied year after year to pay for these items. Now, I will say that there remains capital projects out there that we have yet to come up with a financing plan on. So that's a very important process that we'll be undergoing in a few short weeks. And you'll be involved in that plan as we establish the budget process. I believe that we have the revenue streams to pay for these items, but please keep in mind that the capital plan has not been established as of today. We're still also waiting on some of the comprehensive planning processes that will allow for a better enumeration of capital planning items even. So there's some things that in the water and sewer process, we'll identify items that probably haven't even been identified yet. So with that, I'd submit to any questions that the commission may have.
Mr. Kessel, I have some questions. You compared selected positions to like the city of Mandan and Williston and I think Minot. And the salaries you were comparing were our year one or entry level salaries. And I assume the salary numbers that from those other cities were their entry level numbers also?
That's correct. We obtained some of that information from those entities. Some of it was provided to me by various departments from within the city. I'm making the assumption that that is exactly the case. Some of these were advertised positions, so the information was garnered from newspaper ads that were placed in the paper.
Each city, I suspect, has its own differences in how it administers wages and salaries. You know, for example, we very much have a time and grade system. We have, you know, schedule I'm looking at least 10 steps here for most of these positions. Each city is probably different than how they do these.
Not only is each city different, but each state agency and county, because we did compare some of the salaries to counties and state agencies, but
So
yes.
if we looked at averages or medians, we might come up with a difference in the disparity between Dickinson and these other cities.
In terms of beginning wages or in terms of?
No, I'm saying average.
Oh, average, oh.
Because over the course of, for example, if we used a police officer certainly gets paid quite a bit more money if they're in the 10th step of their grade as opposed to the first step. Yeah, we have 10 steps. If another city has no steps or only 3 steps or does something, pay for performance, for example, rather than time and grade, you know, over the course of one's career here, the average could be different here versus, say, the average in Williston or Minot or wherever.
Most certainly. And that average could be higher or lower, depending upon how they apply, yes.
I guess, you know, I'm concerned that there probably isn't as much science or objectivity in the salary study you presented to us 2 weeks ago. I think in your report you said to us that and I believe it's the annual cost and not just a 6-month cost, that this would be an additional, your recommendation would be an additional $350,000 plus maybe. Was that an annual cost?
That is an annual cost,
Okay.
yes.
And of course, once you do it, it's a reoccurring cost year after year.
That's correct.
One of the issues I raised were, you know, the impact on pensions, because I could be wrong on this, but I think when part of the pension formula is you just take the 5 highest earning years that an employee has and you average those and apply it to the formula, and that determines the pension liability. What I want to point out is right now our city employee pension is only funded to 35%, which is quite low. And in that funded ratio calculation, we assume salary growth of 4% per year. So if we've already gone up, what percent this year? What did we budget for at the start of the year?
About that.
About more, okay. So if we go another 7 to 9% on top of that, plus I suspect you're going to come in with a significant increase for the 2013 budget, our pension deficiencies are going to be even greater. With the police department, it's a little better shape. It's about a 59% funded ratio, but they assume a 4% sales growth or 4% salary growth. One of the issues I raised 2 weeks ago is if we're going to be looking at increases beyond 4%, then I think we have to look at the employee contribution. The employee currently contributes 5%. If you're going to request that we grant a 7 to 9% increase, I think the employee contribution has to go up quite a bit. Even an increase less than 7%, I think we have to look at raising that employee contribution. And, you know, if we're going to do something like this, or at least consider it, I'd want to look at this maybe a little more comprehensively in terms of how we deal with it. In other words, I'm not in favor of doing anything here with increases without addressing this pension issue.
And certainly, President Johnson, you know, the pension does need to be considered. It is cumbersome because we have 2 separate pension programs within the city, a defined benefit and a defined contribution. And all of the comments that you made are in reference to the defined benefit program. And it will increase our pension liability. When you increase salaries, there is a relationship there. There is no doubt. Now, on the defined contribution side, it's 5% the city puts in, and then the employee puts in 5%. And so there is no further obligation on behalf of the city beyond that 5%. So if those people who are in the defined benefit portion are required to put in additional dollars, we'd have to somehow discuss what happens with the defined contribution side, the employees who participate in that plan.
I don't disagree with you.
Mr. President, on the defined benefit side, Do you remember what we ended up contributing last year in excess of what we budgeted?
On the defined benefit, I don't think we contributed anything greater than what we budgeted, but our budgeted increases have gone up significantly over prior years. Now, the last 2 years, or maybe 3, we've been fairly steady. But we have quite an underfunded position in both the city employee and the police plan, and the city employee is the one that's in the toughest shape here. And we're working, I think it's with about a 20-year horizon to try bring that underfunding to a point where it's adequately funded. So if you know, the actuary in their calculations is, I think it's 20 years, we assume that we'll get to a position where we're comfortably funded. Now, these plans will eventually terminate, but since we still have some fairly young employees who are part of the pension plans, these pension plans could be with us, you know, another 40, 50 years yet before, you know, the last person expires, I guess.
So at this time of the year, you don't feel that we'll need to make any contribution at the end of the year to that plan?
Well, we're making roughly $1 million in total to the 3 plans annually, and that would be our general fund and our enterprise funds. That's up, again, significantly than what we used to do. Mr. Kessel?
Well, I was just going to say, since I've been here, I can't speak, of course, prior to that, but we have followed the actuary's recommendation each year and funded it to the level that the actuary has suggested, and President Johnson's accurate that it has changed significantly. We did change actuaries, and so we looked at some of the underlying principles that determined what that ultimate payment was going to be, and I think we're much more accurate with those underlying principles.
Our prior actuary made some assumptions that turned out to be poor assumptions, and so we were underfunding the pension plans, and at the same time, we were getting hit by, remember that the commission back, I think in 1992, allowed lump sum distributions. So we got hit especially hard by lump sum distributions right at the same time that the stock market fell between 30 and 40%. So our pension funds had quite a loss in value and quite a withdrawal. And so it took us from being comfortably funded to where we're now underfunded. And again, our assumptions are based on a 4% salary growth year over year. And actually, we just increased that. I think before that it was 3%. And I'm not saying that we necessarily have to limit our salary growth to 4%, but I think if you're going to go much beyond that, then you have to look at requiring our employees to contribute a higher percentage. And we wouldn't be asking our city employees to do anything that the state hasn't asked the state employees. But now, Mr. Kessel has pointed out that we have that group of employees who have joined the city since April of 2006. They're no longer part of the pension plan. They have a defined contribution plan. And so, for example, if we ask the city employees to contribute 6%, we may have to ask those that employed after June 6 to contribute 6%. It's been the city's policy to date since then that we would match their contribution. That would raise our contribution from a 5%er to a 6%. And I would like to have these kind of issues nailed down before we make any mid-year adjustments, if we make any at all. You know, we made a mid-year adjustment last year. So our employees had an increase January 1 of 2011. They had a mid-year increase in 2011. They had another increase January of 2012. You're back here asking for a mid-year increase in 2012. I'd much prefer that we deal with this as a budget item and try to live with the budget. I understand, though, too, that things are changing pretty rapidly in the oil patch, and sometimes it's difficult to plan 12, 15 months in advance. But,
Mr. President, Mr. Kessel, in your survey questionnaire that you handed out, you did not pose the question whether they'd be willing to increase their contribution to, say, 6%.
Commissioner Steiner, no, you're referring to the employee survey that we conducted? No, we did not ask if a willingness on behalf of our staff, if they'd be willing to do that or not.
So currently, as the mayor stated, we're at 4%, correct?
no, the actuary assumes that salaries will grow at 4% year over year on average for when you look at the 20 or 30-year horizon of the pension plans. Our city employees currently contribute 5% of their base salary to the pension plan. So I'm trying to remember, and maybe Mrs. Johnson remembers, but the city pension contribution as a percentage of wages is close to 50%, right? No, it can't be that high. Must be about 20%. That be, you know these numbers better than I do, so.
Our pension expense is about $1.2 million for 2012. I would say our payroll is probably close to $6 million.
To 6 million, so about 20% then. So our pension contribution is a fairly high percentage of payroll currently. I'm not opposed to authorizing the 3 new positions, the additional fire position and the 2 in solid waste. But I am opposed to granting the request for salary increase as it stands right now.
That's kind of what I was wondering, if we could break this out and approving the new positions at this time and to take a good look at this here when we do our budgeting. I would be okay with that.
Mr. Jackson.
I have a couple thoughts. These new positions, especially solid waste, we can fund those ourselves if we need to. We can handle it with rates and fund those ourselves. And I'd like to see us proceed that way rather than relying on dollars from the state. We need to try to get those dollars from the state. Don't get me wrong. We need to do that. But I want to know that we have the means to do this ourselves. With inspectors, we can do things with permit fees and all of that. That's going to make me feel a lot better about new positions, and I think we need the positions. Mm-hmm. But I'd like to see us have at least the option of handling the funding of those positions ourselves. Again, if we get funding from the state for some of that, that's great. I just want to know we can do it ourselves. I think that we have to recognize the times we're in with salaries, and I do think we have to look seriously at doing something. But I share my confidence level isn't high enough yet to do that 7%. I think we need to do a little bit more research with other communities. I saw the numbers, and they're probably right on. They may be right on, but I'd like to see us do some more work. I just would feel better. We have obligations to our employees to pay them a good salary, but we have obligations to have a budget that works too. We got to have both. So I'd like to see some more work done on that.
If I may, Commissioner Jackson, when you say more work, could you expound a little bit more about that? What would you like to see?
well, some of the things that the mayor talked about. You know, I'd like to know more, I'd like to be more confident that the numbers we're comparing our salaries against with other communities really is an apples-to-apples comparison. How do they operate? They probably don't have a 10-step process. And if they don't, we have to acknowledge that. We have to know what that does to us to really get to apples.
One of the other things was the how to pay for the strategies. One of the recommendations is the crew camp annual fees. And we were just talking about this earlier, that we haven't heard anything from Accommodate since they've been in here. And with what is the rumors you hear, or whatever you hear from the oil industry about the price of oil and things slowing down, I wonder if they're still on board for their timeline. Have you heard from them at all?
No, Commissioner Steiner, I'd be very surprised if we see a crew camp in Dickinson the size of which we approved the application. I believe they've scaled back. They've always intended to build that in phases. So I'd be very surprised if we see anything approaching 1,000 people by the end of the year. In fact, I'd almost be surprised if we see 600 by the end of the year.
And we were projecting $400 per unit, correct, from the crew camp?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that made up about $40,000, I think, is what was identified in the staffing plan.
And if that's not there, I mean, I'm just kind of concerned about Accommodate right now with where they're at.
And I share that concern. I think there was more than adequate revenue in the other identified sources, that if that one went away, it wouldn't impact funding of the recommendations. But I tend to agree with you on theory that our revenue stream there is going to be much smaller than anticipated at year end.
If I recall correctly, the general fund 2012 budget, if on a budgeted basis, had us in a negative, and I think the negative was $400,000 or $500,000 a year. 500. So what Mrs. Johnson said were the revenues, the new forecast, will be in excess of $900,000 of what we forecasted. Let's say they're $1 million, and we have a $500,000 deficit. That means if everything stays the same, we have a $500,000 surplus. If we have $6 million in salaries and we go 7% increase, that's $420,000. You're back to a balanced budget, which is fine, but we're not carrying in this year's budget much monies for capital expenditures. The largest capital expenditure that we have relating to a building is the downstairs remodel here. We have yet to figure out just how we're going to fund that Public Works building, which I think we're operating on the basis that that's going to be at least a $10 or $11 million type expenditure. So, you know, to say that, you know, you have the monies, well, yes, you have the monies for this year, but I'm not at all reassured that we have the monies on an ongoing basis. And I think I just saw a news report and I hope I don't misquote him, but I think I saw a news report where Lynn Helms, the state's mineral division director, said that he thinks we're leveling off right now with our rig count of somewhere between 200 and 215 rigs. And if we are going through a leveling off period, then I would think that maybe the growth that we've seen in our community, while I think will continue to grow, maybe might not grow at quite the same rate of increase that we have been experiencing, say, the past 12 to 24 months.
Just heard Mr. Helms speak on Friday, and he did mention that leveling off that you just mentioned. He does expect that 215 210 to 225 will probably be our rig count for a while. He hasn't changed his opinion that the population gain could see in North Dakota could be a million people. So even though the leveling off has occurred, he is using the same expectation regarding population gain and job growth.
Not gaining a million, reaching a million.
I'm sorry, reaching a million,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
yeah.
Well, I think we probably have a long-term competitive disadvantage with salaries. I think we probably do. And I do think we need to try to do it, to fix that. But I think we need to be as surgical as we can about it. So I'd like to crunch some more numbers.
Would, do we have any problem authorizing the two solid waste positions and the additional position for the fire department?
I don't at all.
Not at all.
No.
Would there be a motion to approve those staff increases?
Make that motion.
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Holtman?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. I wouldn't be opposed to, retaining some outside, third-party help, rather than you make some calls and we look at some newspaper ads and, maybe a little more scientific. And I'm not necessarily saying we get into a big, expensive salary study here, but at least where we perhaps get a third party that maybe has some knowledge when it comes to political subdivision, wages and salaries in, say, North Dakota, and understands what other communities and counties do, what kind of process they have, and we get a little more objective. Not that you're not competent and objective, but
Well, I'll certainly look in that, and I appreciate you mention it. Finding somebody timely is probably the difficult part, engaging them and then conducting the research. I'll certainly look at that as an option.
it may mean that we end up making a different size adjustment at the first of the year rather than a mid-size adjustment here, too, or a mid-year adjustment. Well, regarding the staffing plan, would there be any other motions or any other action you want to take or any other comments before we move on?
I think it's important that our staff hears the right timbre of what we're talking about tonight. I mean, it's just a matter of trying to do this right, trying to do it accurately, I think, is what we're trying to do. And as far as doing some work, I wonder if the business school or the HR, some of the HR classes at DSU could give you a quick hand doing something quick like that.
Yeah, I mean, you're asking us to make, say, a $400,000 non-budgeted expenditure that reoccurs year after year. That's, if you present value that back, it's a pretty big expenditure. All right. Well, it just seems appropriate after discussing that item, we go to the cemetery contract. Are you introducing that also?
Yes, I am. President,
I'm opposed to it. Oh, no.
we're not going to bury anybody anymore, huh?
No.
The cemetery excavation contract is one we've done on a regular basis. It exists for 2 years. We bid this contract out, and then we collect, of course, anybody interested in performing these services. We would open up any bids received on August 27th, and then make a recommendation for award starting on October 1st. I believe that the resolution was included in the agenda for your review, but that's the basics of the cemetery excavation contract.
Okay, you've heard Mr. Kessel's introduction. Are there any questions? Has it already been 2 years since we did this last?
It has.
I don't think there is a resolution here. Is there? I think is it just a motion to approve putting the contract out for bids again?
President Johnson, you're correct. Yep, you're right. There is no resolution. It's just a outline of the contract, or the bid process, yes. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Does anybody have any other comments? Not, would there be a motion to authorize bidding out the cemetery excavation contract?
So move.
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Mr. Croton, would now be a good time to go back to the 510 public hearing item?
Yes, Mr. President, I believe the applicant is here. I can go do a quick summary with respect to Rolling Hills Planning Unit Development. I know the applicant would like to give a brief presentation as well. This is a rezone petition from R1 to Planning Unit Development for the purpose of building 21 buildings for apartments totaling 360 units with site amenities. The property is approximately 11.76 acres. It is located at the intersection of State Avenue and 8th Street Southwest. Staff recommends approval contingent upon the 8 conditions that are listed in your packet materials. I have made some modifications to the plan unit plan, and I forward that to the applicant. I don't believe any of those should be earth-shaking with that. She could comment on that if she prefers. Other than that, I will defer the remainder of that to the applicant to present some items for you today.
Okay, and Mrs. Grant, this is ordinance number what?
Mr. President, it's ordinance number 1478.
1478. Okay.
Good evening, Dina Ellis on behalf of Bluff Communities. I apologize about being late. I've been bumped on 8 flights. I was supposed to be here yesterday, and I slept on the floor of the Denver airport and have been up for 30 hours, so this may not be my very best presentation ever. What Mr. Croton had said was actually correct. I did want to make one clarification. It's not 11.76 acres, it's actually 31.76 acres. It's actually a fairly large project, and I think in your notes, Ed, you had indicated that there's a large portion of it that we've actually left with the natural terrain, and we're probably only using probably 50% of the site or so for actual development. So it is 360 units. We were before P&Z, I think about a month ago or so, and received their recommendation for approval. I have no issues with any of staff's comments or conditions. There is one issue, though, I did want to find out for clarification on the timeline. Originally, Planning and Zoning had said 3 years from the execution of the PUD, and this now says it's 2 years from the first building or 6 months, whichever is more strident. So the way I read that is, I'm just concerned more, I'm not concerned with the concept so much, just with the wording of it, because if it's the more strident, it could be inferred that means all 21 buildings have to be built in 6 months. And the 3 years is important because where we are in the cycle potentially of having the project approved, if this project was approved in the spring, this 2-year timeline would not be difficult, but our engineer is actually here this evening. He'll tell you he's starting to work on the improvement plans, and we're just in the bid process for an architect. So those are my only comments.
Mr. Mr. President, with respect to the condition, I could check the record. I know that it was brought up that the applicant proposed 3 years, and then we went back and forth on some discussion items. I thought it was settled at 2 years from the first certificate of occupancy of the building, or at 6 months from the execution of the contract. Then you would start your 2-year time period. But I could double check that and modify it accordingly at the second reading if necessary. I'll just need to check the minutes specifically on that. I could be in error, but I thought that I had that correct.
And with that clarification, I have no other comments, unless there's comments from the council members.
Any comments or questions by commissioners?
Mr. Khan, if it is 3 years, would that change your recommendation?
It wouldn't change my recommendation. I'll support the decision from the Planning Commission. The intent of that, and we had talked about changing it. We had modified the plan unit development ordinance. We have talked about it in times past that we have I think roughly 3,600 apartments that are part of the R3 allocation, either entitled or in the process of being entitled. So the Planning Commission and city staff felt that the best way to ensure that any new apartments that were going to be proposed, we would do this as a plan unit development concept in order for us to establish conditions to make sure that it's going to be built and not to be used in essence as an entitlement or to be used as a commodity on the market in which you have a rezone and you decide to flip the property or use it for the highest bidder because the city is no longer approving apartments. So I have no problem with the 3 years if that's how the record reflects.
And just a point of clarification too, I have no problem with that either. My recollection is it's 3 years, and we actually self-imposed, I think Ed would tell you that condition on ourselves with the application, because we agree there are a lot of things that have gone through the approval process with the city of Dickinson. We're committed, we build apartment projects all over the nation, and so we recognize that, and we have no problem with that recommendation.
For the viewing public's benefit, can you describe, Mr. Curtin or Ms. Ellis, just where this is located in Dickinson?
It's on I would describe it on the southwest quadrant of the city, down on the south side of State Avenue, and I believe it's 8th Street Southwest. It's east of the city-owned golf course, and it's within the city. It's literally within the edge of the city boundaries. 8th Street is your city boundary on the south portion, and 8th Street, this property is the last one. Anything to the west of us is actually outside of the city limits.
This is in the...
This is in the city limits. There is no annexation.
I think the best place to describe it is if you're going out the golf course, coming down south, you're straight.
If you're coming down State Avenue, there's a large hill on the property. I don't know if that helps to identify the project for anyone, but it's directly at the intersection of, I guess it would be the northwest corner of 8th Street Southwest and State Avenue, but it's on the north side.
You're on the north side?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I help you out there? It's, right,
Yeah.
Second Nature, and then you're next to the south, and it goes up to the Riddle property.
Oh, okay, that's helpful.
Okay.
Well, I'm sure we've clarified it now for the viewing public.
I can drive you there if need be.
I don't want people to think it's going south of...
It is not. No, it is definitively within the city limits.
Directly across from Hart River.
Correct. From the elementary, correct.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Mr. President, I'm not sure I can vote. I mean, they have closed on the property. Can I still vote, or do I need to abstain because my company was involved in the sale?
Right.
Well, Mrs. Grant, what do you think? Does she have a material interest here? Have you already been paid?
Oh, yes,
Well,
long time ago.
And we've never met.
then it doesn't really matter, I would assume.
Okay.
But we'll let Mrs. Grant think about it.
Mr. President, I don't think under these circumstances there would be a conflict.
Okay. Well, since it's the first reading of ordinance 1478, we'll just ask, is there anybody else from the public that would like to comment regarding this proposed ordinance? If so, you can come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. There's no one else from the public, so are there any other comments or questions by city commissioners here?
One other comment. I don't know if this is going to be coming up in your presentation. Are you going to give a presentation?
Well, I think really the orientation is really as I indicated, we're hiring a local architect actually for the working drawings. This is a project that we've actually built in other areas, but I had it modified. So if there's specific questions about the design or anything like that, I'm happy to take those. Obviously, the stairwells are enclosed. You know, we are a builder of substance, you know, throughout the United States, hotels, apartments, single-family projects.
Just one question.
Sure.
You're talking about 21 buildings totaling 360 along with site amenities. What are the amenities?
Oh, there is a large clubhouse. Our expectation interior to the clubhouse will probably be a yoga room, weight room, a large area for families. And part of what we're doing is we had been advised originally to actually potentially do only 1 and 2 bedroom units. These are 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units to allow families to be able to live here, you know, with a larger type of floor plan. Inside, there'll be a large fireplace, pool, not a pool table. We are not going to do a pool in this facility because we think the city's existing facility is great. We are likely to do a very large hot tub on the outside, pergolas, barbecue areas, probably horseshoe pits. Then also there'll be a large grassy area so people can throw a ball and kick around the soccer ball and do those type of things.
No restaurant planned at this?
No restaurant, no. No.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments? Okay, so would there be a motion regarding first reading of ordinance 1478?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second?
We have the motion and the second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here. Okay, we're back to the non-timetable agenda, and the first item there, or remaining item, is safety management report.
Thank you, President Johnson. I'll be giving that report this evening. You have in your documentation provided a copy of that report. This is the end of the second quarter report. We've had 35 incidences so far this year in 2012. 35. This matches our year-end total for last year. 9 of those incidences have required medical attention, and thankfully, all those employees have returned to work. 5 of them did so with some restrictions, but they were able to come back. So we're glad, too bad that there was an accident, but glad at least that they could come back to work so quickly. We do have a breakdown of those incidences by department. You can see that the majority, well, not the majority, but the department with the most incidences occurs in solid waste with 19. The rear load trucks tend to be a cause of injury because of the lifting material and the twisting and bending and throwing it back in, throwing those materials into the back of the rear load truck. So, so they've had 19 incidences. The police department is second with 14. 2 of those are property damage incidences, 12 without medical attention. So the injury types, inhalation hazard, we did have an incident at the solid waste at the Baylor building where we had 3 people in one incident have to seek medical attention. Thankfully, they all returned to duty. But that is the largest or most numerous single injury type is inhalation hazards. And with that, I guess that would conclude my report. The rest of it is in front of you for your review. We do have an elevated, unfortunately, report for you today, and hopefully we can get a little bit better at stressing safety and making sure that our employees remain uninjured the remainder of the year. I do have 2 additional reports that aren't on the agenda this evening, if you'll indulge me. The first is just a review of the plan review services. We are, you may have heard about this report previously. I know that it was on public radio today. The city of Grand Forks has called the city of Dickinson and wanted to obtain some information regarding some private industries. We in turn tried to focus their offer of assistance to the city of Dickinson as opposed to the private side, and requested that they review plan review services. As you know, we've had a retirement in our building inspection department. We've augmented some of that staff, but we still remain behind. We're about 30 to 40 commercial building permit issues behind schedule, and so we're looking at ways to help our current staff with remediating that backlog and trying to stay current moving forward. The two-pronged approach to doing that includes hiring a private entity to do a majority of that backlog, and then hopefully we can enter into a joint powers agreement with the city of Grand Forks to keep us current. What they would do is provide plan review services for commercial building permits. We'd be able to provide those plans to them either electronically or through the mail. They would be engaged to do the plan review per our code, our adopted code, and then return those to the city of Dickinson, and then we would issue the building permit based upon their recommendations. We do not have a presentation or draft for you today of a joint powers agreement. They are going to be discussing this at the committee level at the city of Grand Forks tomorrow. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. Again, a way to engage the public/private sector to help us with an area that we've seen a tremendous amount of growth. Now, the last item that I wanted to just mention, you all received a letter from Lori Sticka regarding concerns of the operations of Continental Metals. Her residence is located just south of the Continental Metals property. That area is an industrially zoned area. That home and another home in the immediate vicinity are non-conforming uses at this time. And there's been concerns raised about smoke of different colors emanating from the property at Continental Metals, and more recently, there's been concerns expressed regarding odors emitting from that Continental Metals property. We have had a presence at Continental Metals several times. Our police department was dispatched at least on one occasion, and our fire department was also present at Continental Metals. I did call the current manager. What they have done is hired a firm to come in and cut large pieces of metal down to smaller pieces that are more manageable, more easily moved, and transported. The firm that does this has specialized equipment, and they are able to cut through the metal without any kind of pre-treatment, meaning they don't wash it, they don't remove paint, they just simply cut it. It appears that process is the cause of the different colored smoke, and now the cause of the odor issues that are being experienced in that area. I have spoke to Ms. Sticka on a couple different occasions, most recently this morning at 6:30 a.m., and previously we met and discussed options in regards to their continued residence at that property. I believe that the best remedy right now is a discussion with Continental Metals, and if they don't cease operations, Ms. Sticka has the opportunity to file a formal complaint, and we can go through the formal court proceedings, possibly a long-form complaint resulting in Attorney Grant's hands as a potential prosecution. So I'd certainly take questions on any of these reports that I've provided. It is unfortunate that there has been people inconvenienced by the operations of Continental Metals, and we'll do our best to assist them.
Sean, can you explain, you said Continental Metal is zoned industrial for their purpose, and then you made mention of non-conforming residents. What do you mean by that?
That area several years ago actually originated, I believe, as a residential area, and it was rezoned after that Sticka home was present, and it was rezoned as an industrially zoned area. And including the Sticka property and the adjacent properties. So now that they're in an industrial zoned area, if that home was to ever burn down and become damaged to beyond 50%, they could not rebuild that as a home. It would have to be used for an industrial purpose. It limits its usage. It can continue in that manner until it ceases operations as a residential dwelling. And as soon as it does cease operations as a residential dwelling, it would have to adapt to our current code. And maybe, Mr. Corton, is that a good explanation? Would you like to add to that in any way?
I think you covered it very well. You know, after it was rezoned, the sensitivity, if you want to use the term, towards the residential side of that's kind of is removed. I mean, there are sections of our code that address noise and odors and with respect to industrial uses, but the predominant use is the industrial use. And the normal sensitivities you have with respect to residential next to commercial are significantly removed because the area is industrial. And the idea behind it is over time, the residential component, though it could stay in perpetuity, it could stay forever as long as it's that way, eventually will remove itself. And then the whole area will be industrial. But there are some provisions, as Mr. Kessel mentioned, that we could look at. There is a provision with the fence. There is provision with the odor. There's some odd areas that it has to go through. It does talk about that in the industrial district, that it needs to come through the planning commission. I'm not sure why we have that in our code. That's something that need to discuss with legal and see how that is applied. But there are some areas that we could address with respect to their current operation. So I hope that answers your question, Commissioner Oltens.
And when was this zoning change made? Do we know?
You know, Commissioner Owens, that's an answer I'd have to find for you, but it's been made several years ago, many, many years ago. I'm not sure if, Engineer Soren, you have a possible answer?
Pre-1980, it must have been.
Yeah, I don't remember. I know we did some research on that in the past, and I can't remember the exact date, but it's I think, 20 years plus.
I think even when Mr. Sund was here, we looked at that issue, and I could very well be mistaken, but I wonder if this didn't even start out in the county before it became part of the city. I just can't remember, but I think it's much greater than 20 years ago even.
Yes.
And I would like to add to that, I have talked to Mrs. Sticka, and the thing is, the noise is not the issue here, it's the odor, and that they're getting physically sick. So I recommend she call the state, and she calls Southwest District Health, and she has been doing that, so. And again, the value of the property, of course, is not going to be what it was when they bought the property. Had it remained, I think it was residential ag at the time, because they were county.
There has been other entities down there who have complained about the smoke and such, and I have spoke with their managers as well. But this odor issue appears to be something fairly recent, and one we can continue to follow up on. That would conclude my reports for the evening, then.
Okay, are there any other questions for the city administrator? Now, we'll go to public safety, and we'll hear from Chief Sivak, Fire Department. Chief.
President Johnson, Commissioners, I'd like to start this evening with a presentation of the Fire Department activities for the month of June, and then follow that up with the 2011 annual report. In June, we saw 33 calls for service compared to 23 in June of 2011 and 20 in June of 2010, 65% increase over 2010, a 43% increase over 2011. Fire prevention and public education, we were at 18 routine inspections, 27 follow-up, and you'll see why in a moment. we were very limited with our availability of staff to get out on the street. The amount of work just coming through the front door, the amount of work involved in plan review and in code review has kept our people busy and unfortunately has kept them in the office. Right now, I'm proving to you that I can't run a PowerPoint presentation. June activities. Mark Selly attended the National Fire Academy in Emmitsburg, Maryland. Principles of Fire Protection, Structures and Systems, that all deals with fire suppression systems. He was gone for 2 weeks. Special Operations, our Special Operations team encompasses several members, about 10 members of our department. And they practiced ropes and knots. That's deceiving when you see practicing ropes and knots. That's patient packaging, that's rappelling, that's lowering someone into a confined space, that's retrieving someone from a confined space. It's lumped together under a category known as ropes and knots, but it definitely deserves more explanation. Regular training was truck evolutions. Our members worked with their assigned fire apparatus. And with that, I'll entertain any questions concerning the monthly report before I start the annual report.
Your year-to-date calls for service, how far up are they?
Well, I'll cover that in part of the annual report, if I may.
Well, you'll have through June of 2012, you'd have what you're up.
Year-to-date, we're at 231 calls for service, as compared to year-end of 2011 of 286 calls for service. So we're averaging approximately 30 calls for service per month. So we are unfortunately easily going to surpass last year's calls for service in our projections. And if you're ready, I'll continue with the annual report. In 2011, at the end of 2011, the Dickinson Fire Department was made up of 37 firefighters, including the 5 full-time staff. In addition, we have 2 chaplains that work with our organization, and we have 4 reserve firefighters. Of our members, however, 48% of current membership has 5 years or less experience with us. So even though our organization dates back to 1891, our membership is pretty young. What's interesting to note, however, in the next 1 to 3 years, up to 5 key senior level, officer level positions may be lost to our department. And those are members that have 20 or more years of service with us. And they're all key officer positions. Our members' dedication to the community is reflected by their training, by the commitment to training. The training takes place evenings and weekends. And the essentials category, the red column you see on the left-hand part of that chart, that's our in-house training program. That's the training that we give to new people that join our department. It starts in September of every year, usually ends about March of every year, and of the next year, I mean. And it sets them up for certification testing, for state certification with the state of North Dakota. The far right side is the State Fire School. We always send at least 8 members to State Fire School. We've been very fortunate and very proud to have several of our members actually be acting as instructors at the State Fire School. Our largest category for our in-house training is the special training. It encompasses several different areas. And under special training, those areas, the topics that they receive, advanced fire investigation, art of reading smoke, emergency vehicle operations, fire and life safety, wide area search, and the other, which encompasses approximately 31 hours, is special operations, tactics, incident command, strategies, things like that. Fire prevention and public education is an extremely important component provided by our department. Due to the growth our city is experiencing, it's very important that the fire prevention and public education program remains viable and plays an important role in the service we deliver. Now for the bad news. Routine fire inspections in 2011, we saw a 20.25 decrease compared to 2010. Follow-up inspections, we were down 17.5. Walk-through, drive-through, a lot of that means construction type of inspections. we saw a 77% increase. Actual construction inspections, an 88% increase. Sprinkler system testing and fire alarm system testing, a 240.75% increase over 2010. And in the chart, the category listed as final inspection, that's how our database captures some construction inspections. You see final, that means construction inspections. The increase in construction inspections and the inspection and testing of fire suppression and alarm systems and the time involvement related to these activities directly relates to the decrease in the other code activities. Year-to-date, or year-end, in 2007, all inspections, we conducted 1,557. 2006, we hired a firefighter. Between 2006 and 2007, we started to redirect that position to fire inspection. 2008, we started to see some results from that, and the increase to 1,653 inspections. 2009, I know I don't have to tell any of you, things started to get really busy for the city of Dickinson. We started to lose ground immediately. 2010, we regained a little bit of that. In 2011, we lost a bit again, maintaining status quo for our department, but not maintaining status quo for the activity of the city, unfortunately. Fire prevention and public education, extremely important component. In 2011, our Fire Prevention Bureau presented age-appropriate fire safety lectures to 1,102 students ranging from preschool through college. Fire drills were conducted in all public and private elementary and secondary schools, as well as Dickinson State University dormitories. In addition, our staff conducts fire extinguisher training throughout the year for area civic and private organizations and coordinates the citywide spring cleanup campaign. And again, with the growth of our city, our fire prevention and public education program are more important than ever to reduce the risk of fire and injury in the community. 2011, at the end of 2011, our city limit line looked something like that. The rapid pace of growth in the community isn't without its challenges for our response structure. And the city limit line reflected on this map is already outdated. I'm afraid if we would have brought one here a week ago, by tonight it would possibly already be outdated. A new public safety center housing the Dickinson Police Department and serving as a new headquarters station for the Dickinson Fire Department is being discussed. Our current downtown station would stay in use. When we receive those calls for service, we answer it with a multi-level response. We don't send everybody and everything to every call. The first level is our officer in charge. Any calls that the dispatch center receives are routed to the fire department officer on call or officer in charge. It is up to that individual to decide the appropriate response depending on the incident. One of their options is the night duty personnel from 9:30 at night to 6:30 every morning. There is 2 firefighters that spend their time at the fire station. So we have an officer in charge that has the ability, depending on time of day, for 2 firefighters and an apparatus. If it's more than that, or if it's a different time of day, the alert crew response is their choice. That's up to 8 firefighters and 2 apparatus. The general alarm, of course, is everybody and everything. Sometimes special operations team is the appropriate response. A hazardous materials spill, a technical rescue incident, something like that would be special operations. The types of incidents we respond to: fire, explosion, hazardous conditions, rescue, service calls, good intent calls. Those encompass things like smoke detector going off, there's no reason why, we send somebody to investigate. A natural gas leak will fall under service call or good intent call. False alarm or false calls. That's kind of a misnomer there. It encompasses an awful lot. If a system is activated, let's say in a multi-level or multi-family building, because of a cooking situation or a cooking mishap, it's not a fire, the system was activated, the system actually functioned the way it was supposed to. It's truly not a false alarm or a false call, but it's captured under that category. Special type is, again, technical rescue, maybe a hazardous materials call, emergency medical type of calls, things like that. In fire call category alone, building fires, we had 7, cooking fires, we had 4, grass fires 8, dumpster and rubbish fires 8, vehicle fires 13. That also includes heavy equipment and construction vehicles and semis. And equipment fires 1. The graph is a comparison of total calls for service from 2009, 10, and 11. In 2009, we had 218 calls for service. In 2010, we had 240. 2011, 286. So far, year-to-date, as of the end of this weekend, we're at 231. Unlike revenue, this isn't a number that we want to see increase on an annual basis. But unfortunately, like increases in revenue, this is a product of our growing population. Now, how do we respond to that time-wise? 70% of the time, we have someone on scene within 9 minutes of the call. Now, that may be just the OIC, that may be an OIC, one apparatus with 2 or 3 firefighters on it. That's really not that bad. But to go by the nationally recognized standards of good practice, NFPA 1720, which isn't a mandate, as you've heard me say before, it's a recommendation. In structure fires, in general alarm structure fires, we should strive to have 15 firefighters on scene within 9 minutes of receiving the call, and we should be able to do that 90% of the time. Again, it's a way to measure our own performance. Not a have to, but somewhat of a benchmark. Where do we want to be? In 2010, we met that criteria one time for, I believe it was 9 calls. In 2011, for 5 calls that would have qualified, we did not meet that criteria once. Now, the red line shows 501, engine 1. Shows the times that that's on scene. Engine 1 may be on scene with 2 firefighters, minimum of 2 firefighters. We don't let it roll without 2. Or it may have as many as 4 firefighters on it. The green line, of course, is the 9-minute designation. The blue is how many people we've been able to track and the time frame it took to get that many people on scene. Fire dollar loss, again, is an area that we don't want to see increase. And if we can keep that down, we really like to attribute that to a good, aggressive, effective fire prevention and public education program. Here, we're not doing too bad, really, for all the activity that's going on in the community. But one of the things that's difficult for us is to capture the dollar amount. We ask insurance companies to get back to us because it is important for our reports and it is important for our planning. And we try our best to do our own estimations or guesstimations. But can I tell you that that is a hard, fast, accurate dollar amount? I can't. That's one of the things we need to get better at. 2007, of course, was a large dollar loss, involved the Elks Club fire. We did have approximately, I guess, about a $66,000 increase in fire loss in 2011 over 2010. Fire protection cost per capita, however, based on the official census population of 17.8, we're actually down a little bit, $24.87 approximately, compared to $25 in 2010. And if we use the somewhat accepted population figure of 22,000 people, it drops our 2011 cost per capita down to $20.11. Very efficient, very good cost per capita figures there. Equipment replacement, this is a chart you've seen before. The graph represents a 5-year replacement cycle for our current fire apparatus. The last 2 apparatus, 501 and 502, were both purchased, not at the same time, but they were both purchased over a 5-year period with a lease purchase type of setup. If we continue this practice, we'll be replacing our equipment that has exceeded its recommended service life on a regular interval. And in visiting with City Administrator Kessel, it seems to be that this is something we do want to try and continue. It seems to be an effective way of doing this. Recommended service life for a pumper is 20 years. This is somewhat dependent on the community and the level of use, of course. And in Dickinson, we've been exceeding the recommended service life by at least 10 years. The areas in red are the number of years that apparatus is overdue. It would be our intent, based on this, it would be our intent to prepare specs and bid an apparatus in 2013 for delivery in 2014. In conclusion, the Dickinson Fire Department today is an all-hazards response organization. In addition to fire prevention and suppression, there is hazardous material incident response on a local and regional level, and special operations, including technical rescue. Our members are state-certified firefighters, and several of our members are certified fire service instructors. Our department is looked at as a regional training resource, and we embrace that role. It's only through the exceptional dedication of our staff and volunteer members and the support of this commission that we can provide a quality level of service to our community. In closing, I would like to thank you for your approval of the additional staff person tonight. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any comments or questions for Chief Seebuck?
It's amazing, 9 minutes in this kind of traffic we have right now.
Yeah.
No matter what direction you're going.
That's where other items like we've been talking about, the placement of substations, the distance requirements looked at substations, the ability to staff those stations, all of that begins to come into play. But I think the important part there, Commissioner Dukart, is like I stated during my report, I can refer to nationally recognized standards of good practice, but they're not mandates, they're recommendations. And truly, it's my job to present as much information to you, the Commission, as I can in how we're doing with response times and how we're doing with staffing. And really, the decision of the type of department that the City of Dickinson Fire Department is based on Commission decision. Do we want to meet a nationally recognized standard, or do we want to look at something else? Do we want to find a middle ground, so to speak? So that's what I need to do is I need to present as much information to you as I can, and then help you decide where do we need to be.
It's an excellent report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the Police Department report. Chief Dossinger.
Good evening again, Mr. President, members of the Commission. I want to present some data and kind of a summary of what we've seen for the first half of 2012 in the semi-annual report. I'm going to start off with accidents. In the first 6 months of 2012, we have responded to 610 accidents. In the first 6 months of 2011, there were 675 crashes that we investigated. The first 3 months of 2012 definitely reflects the mild winter driving conditions that we had seen. In the first half of 2012, we had conducted 3,686 traffic stops. In 2011, there were 2,614 traffic stops conducted for that time period. You can see in May and June of this year, there was a slight decrease in the number of traffic stops that we had conducted. In the first 6 months of 2012, there were 2,786 citations issued. In 2011, there were 2,185 citations issued for that time period. The first 6 months of 2012, there were 951 warnings issued, and in 2011, there were 883 warnings issued for that time frame. In 2012, we have averaged approximately 2,152 calls for service per month. In 2011, we averaged 1,790 calls for service for the 6 months.
Chief Dossinger, on this slide, since the start of the year, there's just been a gradual kind of decrease in the calls for service. Any ideas of why that may be?
One reason is we are a little short on staff. As I had mentioned, their traffic numbers have decreased a little bit. Those traffic numbers are counted in for our calls for service as well.
They're part of that?
They're part of that.
Okay.
That might be one reflection on that. Even though they have kind of leveled off or tailed off towards the last 2 months, you can see that in 2012 we have responded to 12,994 calls for the first 6 months, and compared to 10,621 calls for the first 6 months in 2011.
It looked like the first quarter was particularly busy this year.
That's correct. Total number of arrests so far, 770 criminal arrests in 2012 and 615 criminal arrests in 2011. I also want to kind of touch on our Southwest Tactical Team. In 2011, for the first 6 months, we responded to 2 calls, 2 team call-outs. So far in 2012, we have already responded to 8 team call-outs. That equals the total amount that we responded to in 2011. 5 of these call-outs this year have been within city limits. The other 3 of them occurred in other jurisdictions, including Hettinger County, Adams County, and Billings County. Are there any questions?
How many openings do you have right now? How many unfilled positions?
Right now, I have 4 on-fill positions and 6 to fill by September. And I want to thank Mr. Kessel for presenting the staffing report to you guys, and I'd like to thank you guys for consideration of that staffing report. Currently, it is extremely difficult to fill these positions. And as you can tell, that our law enforcement agency is kind of recognized as a leader in our region, especially with their expertise and training, which is reflected by our tactical team. And our demands are growing.
Chief Dossinger, is it for housing reasons, or just why are we short-staffed? I thought we were just hiring
I guess
6 more.
right now, as far as our starting wages, we're the lowest paid starting law enforcement agency in the state, in the western half of the state. And it's very difficult to compete with other agencies, especially with the housing market in our area.
Well, they're definitely doing their job.
Thank you.
There was an incident at the backside of Prairie Hills Mall last, I would say Friday night maybe, and I drove up to the police officers. I mean, I was pretty scared when I saw all these men on foot with their backpacks, and I said, are they a gang? And the police officer said, no, we're the gang. And I said, good job.
Are there any questions?
Anything else for the chief? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
President Johnson, if I may. I've spoke to Eric Kidder on the phone a couple times, but I've never met him, and he's in the audience tonight, and he is the manager of Continental Metals. If the commission would have any questions for him, he has offered to present or be available to the commission to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kessel. Was there anything you'd like to say first, I guess?
Let's see, about 3 weeks now, we've been, I've got a torch crew of 7 individuals, contracted out from Battle Creek, Michigan. On site, I do have an individual who does cut steel that I cannot shear, that I can't cut with my shear. He has a little 18-inch torch. The same amount of propane and liquid O2 that goes through his torch goes through the torches that RJ Torching uses. The difference between his torch and the ones that they use is the size of the nose on their 7-foot torches. Pretty much take his torch, the contracted guy that I have at Continental Metal, his torch might as well be the size of my pinky. The stuff that they use, same propane, same liquid O2 that is pushed through his, their nose might as well be the size of my fist. So their nose is a great deal larger. So with 7 guys cutting, and it's just, they can melt, they can go through steel quicker and faster than what my guy can cut on site. So the smell that is coming from Continental Metal is the amount of 7 individuals cutting at a very, very high rate than what my individual will cut. So there is no, well, I can't say there's no toxic fumes, but it's just the amount of steel being sliced through, that is the smell coming from Continental Metal. And the estimated time of departure for RJ Torching, the individuals that are there now, will be next Thursday.
And then you should see your operations return to a more normal flow that the residents around there are used to.
Correct.
With?
Reason that I've had these individuals called in, for, I think it is 1981, to when the land was turned into industrial. I've had them called in because this stuff has been piled up for well over 10 to 12 years. It's stuff, like I said, that cannot be cut with my shear. This will be probably the only time this will ever happen. I'm new to the area. I'm in the military, so I believe in getting it in, getting it out. I'm in the logistic field, so stuff on my property will not be sitting. I don't allow it to. So right now, their estimated time of departure is Thursday of next week, and the stench will be gone, and the only cutting that will be happening will be from my individual that is contracted out, and that's it.
So some of the complaints not only were smell, but the stacking and piling, and that's the other thing that you're taking care of with
Correct,
with
yes,
this
sir.
right now.
Correct.
Trying to remedy all of the complaints in a short amount of time.
Yes. From the time that I stepped in, April 23rd, the yard has changed drastically. I'm setting it up to where it is going to be, well, Army-proof. That's the way us Air Force guys say it. But the way my yard is being set up now, he will be at a different part, the different end of the yard. He's going to be at the north end instead of where we're cutting now is directly in the center of our yard. So when the wind blows, it is heading towards, I don't know the directions of the yard, so, but it is heading right towards the individual's home. So I do apologize for that, but in order to get my yard cleaned up and get everything under control and to my satisfaction, it was the only scenario that I had at that point in time.
I have a question. Why are they cutting it on your site? Are they hauling it away after it's cut, or what are you doing?
I am actually hauling it away in rail cars. There's no way of moving the stuff that we have on hand. Some of the stuff is 30-ton. That has been sitting there for, like I said, for a decade. So the only way to move it, they cut it into prepared pieces, which is 3 foot by 18 inches. I'm storing it in the other end of our yard. So once everything is cut, the contracting individual will get his rail cars in there, and I'll load them, and I'll be done.
And the other question I have is, why at 4:30 in the morning?
It's cooler. They were going to cut from midnight to 10, and I squashed that. I told them they could come in at 4:30, and they were going to cut till 2. They were going to cut from 4:30 to 4:30, but I said they can't be doing 12 hours, so they said 9:30 to 10. So.
Well, I don't think the Stickas are not the only people that live in that area.
True, but they're also cutting behind, when it's 100 degrees outside, they're behind a 400-degree flame. So the earlier that they started, the cooler it is for them and the more work they can accomplish, and the faster I can get them out.
And based on the industrial zoning and all the compliance issues that go with it, that's appropriate in an industrial zone per ordinance?
With respect to your question, Commissioner Oltmans, we have a performance criteria that's specified in the code, and it talks about different issues, noise, but it specifically says next to a residential district, and the house in question is no longer in a residential district, so it's not applicable for that. I think the noise issue is not one that's consistent. The odor issue is, yes, that could be addressed. If they're going to be completed in such a short period of time, if I send out a violation letter, you have to go through the procedures, they'll be already finished,
Right.
But we could at least start that process. There are some, just for your awareness, there are requirements within the zoning code that specifically state for a salvage yard that you cannot have storage any higher than the fence line that you have. I'm presuming that when this is done, that all of that will be resolved. I would recommend that you contact me, I'm the city planner, and then I could walk you through that code in order to be compliant, because we will be looking at those compliance issues in the very near future with respect to you. This could resolve those issues since you're here today.
Copy that.
The other thing, they are losing business because they can't do their work on in their location with their studio because of the smell and the haze around them. So that's another issue that they have with this project too. So we're hoping it's going to end soon.
Yes.
But they were actually very sick today too.
They did actually go out to a hiring agency. They did hire 2 individuals to run a water hose, and I supplied everything for them. So they are, as they cut, they are spraying down the areas to limit the smoke being built up. So they have, and they asked me where they could go get by getting 2 individuals, and I gave them a hiring agency, and they went out and got 2 people. So they're working with me. I'm doing my darndest to keep the smoke from being a nuisance, but at the rate that they cut and the size of the torches that they're using, it's an amazing process, but at the rate that, they are causing quite a bit of smoke cutting the steel that they're cutting.
Any other questions? Mr. Kessel, anything else?
I appreciate you presenting in front of us today. I think Mr. Corton summed it up fairly well. If the options available to the Stickas or anybody in that area is to file a formal complaint, and then we can certainly pursue it at that time, if that's the chosen course of action. But it sounds like it'll end in about 9 days, and
correct.
And that has been a complaint of the Stickas specifically in the past, is the ability to see that product over the fence, and it sounds like that may be remediated.
Yes, all that is being eliminated. You can actually, the pile is disseminating quickly. These, each guy cuts about 23 to 27 ton a day. Multiply that by 7, you're looking at, well over 100 ton a day is being cut. So the pile, I say the pile may be 7 feet high right now, considering it was probably 14 to 17 feet. But it's a very quick process, and I'm getting it done as fast as I can and as safe as I can. That's the big thing, is that I will not approve anything if it's not safe. So that's why I have the water hoses. I actually contacted the city water to actually put a 3-inch hose onto the fire hydrant we have up front, but they're minimum staff, so my next direction was to get 2 people hired in. Well, they asked me, and got 2 individuals. I got water hoses running on each side of the yard, so that was my way of eliminating the smoke.
I think you did mention that the fire department was on site, and I don't want to put any words in Chief Sevak's mouth, but when we spoke, they were commending the operations in terms of safety that they did have. I think you actually have barrels of water on site as well.
2 55-gallon drums on each side of the road. 5, I did have 3, but I put 5 fire extinguishers out there, and then that was the same day that I went out and got both hoses, and then they had somebody hired in no more than 2 days later to operate. So they're actually paying money out of their own pocket to keep these guys on site, just to stand there with the hose to eliminate the fire and the smoke. So.
And hopefully you're wearing masks.
Oh, yes.
It is atrocious smell, because I was out there.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, we're going to move on to tab 6, which is Public Works and Planning, and Mr. Catan, I think this is all yours the rest of the way.
Lucky you, huh?
Lucky you.
The first item I'd like to introduce our new planner, Steve Josephson. He comes to us from Florida. He and I both planned in Florida. I didn't know him at the time, but he planned in a county, just a couple of counties to the north of where I'm at. He is our city county planner. He'll be splitting time with the county to assist them and then also helping me out as well. So I would like, Steve, if you'd like to come up to the podium and introduce yourself.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'll make it quick because I know you have a lot on your plate, and you'll probably be hearing more from me in the future. But my name is Steve Josephson. As Ed said, I've had a number of years working for county planning departments in Florida, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to be here at this time of change. And I believe I have a lot of experience and knowledge that I can bring to you and to the county. So thank you very much.
Well, welcome, and we're glad you're here. You can see it's a busy time.
And probably will be for a while, so.
Sounds like it, yes.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you. Does that conclude your reports?
Adjournment.
Seconded.
All right, go ahead.
The first item I have is the I-94 Industrial Park Second Edition rezone. This is the second reading. This is a rezone from ag to light industrial for the property at exit 64 in section 6. City staff and planning commission recommend approval. There are no changes from the first reading. Mr. President?
Thank you. This is ordinance 1472, second reading. If there's anybody from the public that'd like to comment, please come to the podium now, state your name, we'll hear your comments. No one from the public. Any comments by city commissioners?
President, I'll move that we approve second reading, final passage 1472.
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
The next item is Medora Meadows rezone. This is a rezone petition from ag to community commercial and high-density residential. The property is located to the west of State Avenue and to the west of 15th Street West. There are no changes from the first reading. Staff recommends approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Catan. It's ordinance 1473. Anyone from the public wish to comment? No one does. Any comments by city commissioners?
I make a motion to approve the second reading for ordinance 1473.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
The next item is Lamont First Edition rezone. This is a rezone from community commercial to medium-density residential, or R2. The property is located to the east of Sims Street and to the south of 16th Street. Planning and zoning and city staff recommend approval. There are no changes from the first reading.
Okay, this is ordinance 1474. Anyone from the public wish to comment? No one does. Any comments by city commissioners?
Move to approve second reading, final passage, ordinance 1474.
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman? Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Mr. President, the next item is zoning text amendment. This is an increase in height in the general commercial zoning district from the current 45-foot maximum height to 60-foot. This is a citizen-initiated zoning text amendment. City staff supports it. Just to give it some perspective, the R3 zone, or high-density residential zone, allows 60 feet in height, and our industrial which would be the next highest zoning district, has no height limitation. City staff recommends approval. There are no changes from the first reading.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cruton. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment on ordinance 1475? No one from the public. Any comments by commissioners?
I'll move we approve second reading 1475.
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Mr. President, the next item is a rezone amendment. This is an amendment to our current Renaissance zone boundary. We're proposing on adding one block and deleting one block. The one block that will be added will be Block A and B of McDonald's addition, and the block proposed to be deleted is Block 5 of South Dickinson addition and Block E of McDonald's addition. The purpose for this rezone, or not rezone, but the amendment, is to encourage redevelopment. Subsequent to this amendment is an application for multifamily development. The city has looked at the Renaissance Zone. We haven't had a lot of activity over the last several years with respect to it, and we feel that a modification is necessary in order to support the subsequent development. City staff and the Planning Commission recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Curtin. Any comments or questions for Mr. Curtin regarding this item? There's a resolution, Mrs. Grant, here, and what's the resolution number?
Mr. President, the next resolution number is 40-2012.
Okay. So 40, 2012, then amends the Renaissance zone and makes those physical changes that you mentioned? Removes certain blocks and adds blocks?
That is correct.
And that's all it does?
Yes.
Okay. Would there be a motion regarding the amendment? This is Resolution 40-2012.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have the motion and the second now. Is there any discussion here? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Ullman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Mr. President, as mentioned, the next item is an application for Renaissance Zone. It is a multifamily project consisting of a 10-unit apartment. There's an existing 10-unit apartment and liquor store on site. They're going to remodel it and make it for affordable housing. It's located at 161 South Main. The applicant is here, Chris Fair, who would like to give a brief presentation. Just to give you a summary of it, as part of the Century Code, it's required for the applications to proceed to the Planning Commission for recommendation and ultimately for decision by the City Commission with respect to tax or property tax reduction. The Planning Commission recommended approval of the application and supported the 100% property tax reduction for 5 years, as is noted within the Renaissance Zone. And with that, I'll allow Chris Fair, if it pleases the Commission, to give a brief presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been sitting here a while. Sorry. Thank you for allowing me just a little bit of time. AK Investments is a company my husband and I have had for about 20 years, real estate investment and rentals. And we've owned this building for since about 2003. And we've really always wanted to do something with it. Really is cost prohibitive to renovate existing buildings, as you know. But with the new Housing Incentive Fund by the state, it may make that rehabilitation project a reality. As you heard, it's going to be 10-unit apartments, a combination of 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, and it's affordable housing, and they're just basic apartments, just so that you kind of have an idea. You can picture it in your minds. The current entrances that open out to the west will be eliminated, and 8 of the apartments will open to the north, and then the current liquor store will be 2 apartments, and those will open out to the south. These are along the building is right along the corridor from the airport right into the heart of Dickinson, and I think the Renaissance Zone is a great opportunity for anybody who wants to improve property, especially right on that corridor. So as Mr. Corton said, the entire project is going to be affordable housing. The estimated cost is going to be about $136,000 per unit to put together. So total project cost will be about $1.3 to $1.4 million. We're receiving the Housing Incentive Fund and a grant from Stark Development for $2,500 per unit. FlexPace interest buy-down from Stark Development and the Bank of North Dakota and American Bank Center participating in that with a loan which will be amortized over 15 years. And the other condition of the HIF financing is that we receive property tax relief for the entire 15 years of the HIF funding of the project. We expect to work on the project, begin work this fall and through the winter, and I hope we will have occupancy by the fall of 2013. So to help the project become a reality, we're asking the city to approve the request for the full 5-year tax exemption as specified in the Renaissance Zone guidelines. Taxes for 2011 were $840 on the property. And I would also like to ask you just to consider the property tax exemption or reduction for the remaining 10 years, which is part one of the contingencies of the HIF funding. I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has anything for me.
Any questions for Mrs. Fair?
What kind of rents will you be establishing?
They're going to be kind of set by, sort of set by the state, and I don't have the rents totally figured out yet because the financing is still a little in flux, as is the cost from the contractors. So I don't have it total yet, but they have to be within certain guidelines of the state. And people who live there have to meet income eligibility as well. And that's set by the state.
And will these utilize the vouchers as well?
I'm not exactly sure. I'm assuming they do, depending on which of the programs they go through for housing. There's forms that I'll have to fill out for the state. I report every year and kind of like audited every year to make sure that the people who live there are within the income guidelines and that my rent is appropriate and affordable.
Okay.
We have worked with housing for years, so it's not something that I really worry about. But it's a good option for people to help them get on their feet.
If we extend the property tax for the next 10 years, what type of constraints do you have as far as needing to keep it affordable housing? What type of time frame are you committed to based on what you're applying for?
Yeah, with the HIF funding, the project must maintain affordable housing for 15 years, whether or not I own the property. So if I sold it, the next owner has to accept that as well for 15 years.
Tonight, Mr. Curtin, are you asking that we approve the application? Or is there a different motion here that?
Per the Century Code, we're asking that you approve the 100% reduction in the property tax per the Century Code. The maximum for that would be 5 years. In essence, you would be approving the application, and then it's up to you as a commission to either do a partial or a full property tax reduction to your choice up to a maximum of 5 years per the Century Code. I think that the quality of the project, where it's located, the vicinity of it, I think is warranted for that. This is an incentive to encourage developers to provide affordable housing and to renovate the areas, and I think that area is desperately in need, and this is a good project, so I would recommend approval.
So per Century Code, is it 5 years maximum that we can do for property tax relief?
That is correct.
So I think, Mrs. Fair, you have to come back to the commission 5 years from now and say about the additional 10 years.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Speaking with Mr. Horgan with the Housing Finance Agency, he told me we need to have this somewhat and somehow in place before they will release any funds. So I don't know what type of arrangement he would think would be appropriate.
That HIP financing requires a 15-year exemption?
No, it requires, yeah, he does. He does. That is what is being required. That's not the HIF, but through my application, that is the contingency, because the margin of operation is very small.
Yeah, that creates an issue for, I think, for the commission, because as soon as we grant you a tax exemption outside the norms of the Renaissance Zone, every other developer is going to be here requesting. And I can see, since you're in the Renaissance Zone, we do what the Renaissance Zone allows us to do, but I really have concerns about going beyond that. Not because it's a great amount of money to the city here, but just the predecessor.
Precedent.
Precedent.
That's right.
Well, I also wonder how he can ask you to do more than what the Century Code allows. That seems to be a little bit of a flux.
Yeah, I don't get this.
If I may, I believe this is new, or fairly recent, because I just heard of this recently, the addition beyond the Renaissance Zone. But what you're being asked to do this evening is approve a Renaissance Zone project, which has a 5-year property tax abatement, and some state income tax abatements with it as well, or at least potentially. And in addition to that, as a secondary process, is approve a pilot project, essentially is what you're doing tonight. So
Yeah.
I don't have the details, unless, Ms. Fair, you've provided them to Mr. Corton. I've not seen what those needs are, so that we could present additional information to the
Right.
commission. But it's two separate and distinct processes this evening.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at, what we actually have to do here tonight. I know you support the project, but, so is the motion to approve the application and a 5-year property tax exemption, and is it exemption from state income taxes too?
Well,
We
the
can't-
state makes that decision with
So
respect to that.
we don't mess with that.
Correct, correct. All it is tonight is just the application into 5 years. The pilot side of that can be brought maybe next meeting if we can get the materials together and you can hear that. That's something I can discuss with Mrs. Farrer, and we could do that. But tonight is just the Renaissance Zone.
Okay.
The way I'm understanding this, it sounds like the 15-year requirement with the HIF financing may be unique to this project.
Probably. The state can put whatever requirements or contingencies on that they wish, and I did speak with him today to make sure that I was clear on exactly what he was asking, and he said, yes. He said, yes, you're very clear that we would request that. And he's willing to work with the city. I think the pilot is a great idea. I just kind of found out, to get that clarified this morning, that we needed to come up with an exemption for 15 years. So,
And of course, you're probably just hearing, as we are, the 5-year statute in the Century Code. So of
Right.
course, you wouldn't have said, but the Century Code only says 5 years, and got a response back from him because,
well, I knew it was 5 years, and he clarified for me that he is requesting 15, and that's a contingency. So but I did get that clarified just this morning, because I assumed wrongly that he was just doing the Renaissance Zone 5 years. And so I was incorrect on that, and so I didn't inform staff until I emailed Mr. Kessel as soon as I found out. So that's my error in just not clarifying completely, or maybe assuming too much.
I think that, I think this is a great project too, and I think it's a really pure example of the kinds of things we should be doing with the Renaissance Zone. I think it's really great. And I have no problem proving that tonight with a 5-year extension, or exemption. But I think we should let Mrs. Fair, maybe staff, and the state work on the balance for a future meeting.
Do you have a motion in there? Chair's getting tired.
I'll move that we approve the Renaissance Zone application, including the 5-year property tax exemption.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. And I'd recommend, Mr. Kessel, that you or Mr. Catan actually talk to the state about this, because when they start requiring us to do pilots, and especially a pilot that maybe is a zero payment, that's an issue. I mean, we've been very judicious in how we use that program, because it could get so misused. So I'm just a little concerned, even though this is a smaller project, I don't want to set that word I can't pronounce. Precedent.
Precedent setting.
I got it now.
President Johnson will certainly follow up, and I do believe that Commissioner Jackson is exactly correct, that this is not a requirement of the HIF program, it's more a requirement of financing this specific project.
Well, let's see if we can find a way to help it without a pilot. Okay. Item D.
Okay, Mr. President, the next item is a zoning text amendment. This is a complete overhaul, brand-new subdivision regulations. This is a project that I started, if I recall right, my first or second week. I had intentions to get it completed within a couple of months, but due to our escalating development and other needs and duties that have been assigned me over the year and a half that I've been here, it's been kind of placed on the hold. It's been modified several times. It's been through Planning Commission on numerous occasions, and the final product is in front of you today. I would ask for a little leniency with respect to modifications on the definitions as was mentioned in the summary. I want to add a bunch of definitions for clarification of the ordinance. I was given latitude with respect to doing some modifications on the final provision from the Planning Commission. This is a needed document. The existing subdivision ordinance in many ways is antiquated, and this would modernize our subdivision regulations, allow staff the time that we need in order to get comments with respect to final plat, with preliminary plats and final plats. I have added lengthier time submittals in order to accomplish that. Also, I have broken up the plats. Instead of it all being contained as one, it's now a minor and a major plat. Minor plats are, in essence, existing plats that are replatted, and we have an expedited process. Those would go through Planning Commission, but they would not come through City Commission. The final decision would be at the Planning Commission level. In order to expedite that process, the major plats would be new plats, and that would come through the same process of both the Planning Commission and City Commission. With this, I have new application procedures, classifications, and modernized our design standards, and then also our improvements. I think that this is a very good ordinance. It's just taken time to get here. So with that, I won't walk through the lengthy 28 pages. I will remove that tonight, but I will be available to answer any questions you have with the contingent that I will come back with some modifications to the definition at the second reading. And with that, I would recommend approval and available for any questions you may have.
What's the ordinance number?
Mr. President, the next ordinance number is 1479.
Okay, thank you. Any question?
Yes.
Any questions from Mr. Croton?
Mr. Corton, now this is regarding splitting lots or adding lots to, like 1, 2, 3? I'm a little confused on the way it's written.
Yes, I cover it in different ways. I added a provision that could talk about lot modifications or lot splits, and it's an expedited process. I didn't mention that before, but it's in the section. Then in essence, they would fill out a form. I would look at it to make sure that it's conforming to the local zoning code. And if it is, and if it's just a split of an existing plat, then they would fill out a form. It could be signed by me, and then that split can go directly to being recorded and go to the assessors for a new parcel number. Instead of requiring, as we do now, a record of survey, new legal descriptions, a more prolonged and expensive process for people to do that. So I think that that's a benefit to the community, but it also ensures the consistency factors along with our subdivision regulations. And in essence, it exempts them from going through our entirety of our subdivision regulations.
And that's on the new subdivisions coming up, right?
That is contained within this, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, I really agree with Mr. Croton that we need to move this through. It really is overdue, and it's going to be a big improvement to our process and the quality of work we get. so I hope we pass this first reading tonight. I did talk to Mr. Corton about a couple of other detail changes. I'm not sure. One has to do with the timing between preliminary and final plats. The other has to do with the issue of where utilities are placed in a lot, front versus rear. Rather than trying to address those two changes tonight, I'd suggest we let him alter the wording between now and second reading.
Any other comments? Would there be a motion then regarding the first reading of 14789?
I'll move that we approve the first reading of 1479.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Item E.
The last item that I have, Mr. President, is a report. City staff is seeking direction. As you recall, at the last meeting, the commission approved 3 growth scenarios in order for KLJ to look at land use allocations and more specifically look at infrastructure, sewer, water, and streets, and provide back to you within a month or 2 period a report plus a financial analyst or a financial summary of the cost for each of those 3 scenarios. Since then, our policy is, or practice with the city would be if an annexation is out of one of those 3 or not contained within one of those 3 scenarios, then that annexation should be placed on hold. We've had inquiries, what about annexations located within one of those 3 or located within those boundaries? And that's what I'm asking tonight to seek direction from you. We have, in essence, the West Side annexation contained with your application materials or packet materials. That would be within scenario B, if I recall right, and they are asking for consideration to move forward to City Commission after they have obtained their title reports. Our policy is, or practice is to require title reports up front instead of at the latter end because the title reports are taking a long period of time due to the tremendous real estate activity that is happening. So we are seeking direction. I'm seeking direction in order to how to proceed with and tell applicants that have annexations within those boundaries if you want them to move forward, or do you want to wait, as would be the case with annexations out of those 3 growth scenarios, until they have all been completed and you can make an informed decision.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. Any reaction to his comments and his question?
We have we've got a map that's been given us tonight, West Side annexation. So we're not talking specifically about that annexation. You're talking about the general.
Well, the general would include this, obviously. If you are, as a commission, want to move forward with annexations, I'll just put it this way. If you want to move forward with the West Side annexation, it's been on the table for a while. They like to move forward with that. I think that you should apply it across the board. So the question should be, do you want to hear annexations that are located within any of those growth scenarios? I think it should be applied equally across the board. And the question is, should you wait and have an informed decision after we have those figures together in order to base a decision on annexations, or do you want to hear that prior to it? It makes sense to delay it until then, because then we'll have the numbers together, we'll have breakdowns from KLJ, and also we'll have cost figures for capital improvements with respect to each of those growth scenarios. But I need to get direction from you because I am getting calls and from people, and I just want to make sure that I am looking at it in the same light as you are as a commission.
At the end of the day, KLJ and the comprehensive plan is going to, we're actually going to decide on one scenario. We're not going to have a plan that has scenarios A, B, and C.
That is correct. That is
One
correct.
scenario. And the schedule then calls for us to make that decision in about 2 months? Is that what I heard you say?
We're hoping within a month or two, maybe earlier, but most likely a month or two, that we will present that to you to consider one of those three scenarios, or one of those three scenarios, and then you can modify it if necessary accordingly. But in essence, yes, to one of those three within the next month or two.
So, Mr. Corton, this Westridge is the Roars addition on the other side of the interstate, right?
The one I'm talking about is the west side, that is south of it. This is the map.
Oh, I have this one.
It would be the last of, last information is with your packet materials. It is located to the west, immediately to the west of the business loop, and to the south of Old Highway 10. It'd be westerly of the Western Industrial Park. So I hope that that helps you to define it.
I got it.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Jackson, you're more of our expert on the commission here, but it just seems to me it would be prudent that we wait the 60 days and see where these scenarios shake out before we grant any annexation requests that would certainly be, or would appear to be outside the boundaries of our urban service area. And I guess I'd like to hear your comments, so.
Well, I have three things. First of all, 1 or 2 months?
That's what we're anticipating. I think that's probably a fair assumption, yes.
Okay, I was wrong. I thought we were looking to the end of the year before we had that information, and I've told some people that, so I was wrong in that. That makes a difference in my feelings. I was going to say to you that I don't think we should wait. I'm not talking about this particular annexation, but I don't think we should say that we won't annex anything, because I was under the impression we weren't going to have that information till the end of the year. If it's a month or two, I tend to feel we should wait. But there's a couple other things that are important. Even when we do get that final single scenario, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't mean that we will automatically annex everything that's within that urban growth area line, correct?
That would be left up to the commission. You could hold off on it. But the idea of the urban growth boundary is a 10-year urban service boundary. It would make sense, since that area is within your urban area, that in essence it's going from rural to urban. We will be providing services to that in essence that we should annex lands within that as they move forward.
But we're still going to make a judgment on a case-by-case basis as to whether we need that ground annexed at a certain time. At least I'm not going to look at it as being automatic, that just because it's within that scenario, we're going to annex. Conversely, if there's something outside of that area that maybe hasn't come to our attention, maybe isn't shown in the scenario, there'll be a process to alter that line, that urban growth area line, and include something that's not now within it, correct?
That is correct. That process would be a comp plan amendment. We would modify the boundary of that urban area, and we would also come back with a modification to our capital improvement program, which is how we would fund the infrastructure that is needed to provide support, or to provide the infrastructure for that area. So, and that can be done two ways. You either expand an area beyond what you had originally approved, or you say, okay, we want to go here, and then you subtract another area, similar to what we've done tonight with respect to the Renaissance Zone, in order to keep it within the same confines of the overall analysis. So there's different ways of doing that. We'll have to work out the details. As I mentioned to you before, it could be 6 months or a year. We wouldn't hear those on a month basis. It would be a docket in which we'd hear all of them at once, either 6 months or a year, in order to make informed decisions for modifications to those boundaries.
And I don't mean to belittle the importance of this single scenario we're going to end up with. I think it should really be a significant guide to us for the decisions we make, but I think we have to stay a little bit nimble to do what we think is right for the community. In light of the fact that it's only a month or two, I'd absolutely agree. I think we should wait. It's too important. If it was 6 or 8 months out, I might think differently.
So, Mr. Kuchan, are you know, as you kind of think about this, are you pretty confident that if we said 2 months, that they're going to have that, or be ready to make a recommendation to us?
I spoke with Scott Pickett today with respect to the timing of that. He has supplied some material to me that, I think is very good. I've been working with him on the land use allocation. Apex is doing the sewer modeling, and then they are going to do the water modeling. They feel that they can get that done within that period of time. I think that we could do and say that if for some reason that due to delays of unbeknownst or just due to unforeseen delays, that if 2 months it's not done, then we could, and if you want to, as a commission, you could entertain an annexation or two within that boundary. It's your call, however you want to do that. But I feel fairly confident with their time frame. They felt that was very conservative, and that provided some leniency on their behalf. So I think that within that month or two period, they should have that done. We could always come back and revisit it in 2 months if for some reason it's delayed, and then you can make a decision if you want to entertain those annexations at that point. But I think that 1 or 2 months, you would have more information, you'd feel more comfortable, you can get an idea of, let's say scenario A is, the capital improvement program for that is $10 million, scenario B is $20 million, and scenario C is 15, in order for you to make an informed decision, and from there, help modify where that urban service boundary would be.
I'm gonna say now, while everybody's listening, that I don't see us annexing everything that's in that urban growth area. I may change my mind as time goes by here, but I just don't see the need. And that could change.
Well, I think what you're saying is you don't see the need to annex it in that shorter horizon. 15, 20 years from now, it might be entirely different.
Absolutely.
But I mean, when you look out to that immediate kind of horizon that we can see now, we probably have enough going to handle our foreseeable needs.
I do think we need to annex more than we have. I'm concerned about shortage of R1 property. I think we need more R1 development going on. So I do think we need to annex more than we have today. Okay. Those will all be tough decisions the next several months here.
Mr. President, if I could just add a note, within all three of those scenarios, after our workshop, we had talked about annexation areas that, they had more land use allocation, at least residential, than what we were proposing. In all three of those scenarios, we are looking at roughly 2,000 plus units, dwelling units, in excess of what we think that would be necessary during this development horizon. So we do have a significant fudge factor, if you want to use the term. So to answer your question, Commissioner Jackson, no, you don't have to annex all that property. We've already factored in I think a fairly significant extra portion in order not to confine the market so much that we constrict it and the housing prices go up. I mean, that's a significant 20% or roughly somewhere in there as an additional number of allocation within that area. So we don't have to annex the areas at all. Not at all, but the entirety of it, and we still have extra room as well.
Okay, well, you've heard how Commissioner Jackson feels. Commissioners, do you feel any differently about this issue right now than what Mr. Jackson has said?
I would agree with Commissioner Jackson. I mean, if we can still alter, or Mr. Don also, what he said, if we can still alter the boundary by subtracting or adding, like we did with the Renaissance, I'm okay with that. You know, at which point do we stop? Well, that's my concern there is, you know, like you said, to mention the cost of the developing on the city side, but, you know, I think there's some leeway there for us to work with these boundaries.
My concern is, Mayor Johnson, is our wastewater treatment won't be ready until 2014 with the way we are going. If we would annex them all, I'm afraid that's not going to work, you know, with what we have now.
Engineer Soren, do you have any comments that you'd like to make?
Well, I guess just one comment. You know, the annexation isn't the issue with our wastewater plant. It's certainly the development as we move forward. Certainly, if all the development happened in 2013, for all the annexations that we're seeing, yes, we would have some issues in front of us. But we all know construction times. You know, it does take time, as our plant takes 2 years to get built itself. So, you know, we certainly are trying to stay on top of that and make sure we don't get in trouble, but the annexation of all that land isn't necessarily automatically going to create a problem for us at our wastewater facility.
Thank you. We're almost to you, yeah. As soon as they're done here, then I'm going to ask if there's anybody else that would like to comment, so. And I hope we're really close to done. So, Commissioners, again, anything else that you'd like to say? I guess we're there. Anybody from the public, just come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments.
Thank you. I'm Max Moss with Chase Merritt, and might throw a little monkey wrench in this. We've been talking today about the way that the plans have shaped up, and when we requested annexation for the west side, West Dickinson, I think y'all are calling it, it was always in our plan that part of that was going to be residential, and the way that y'all have zoned it is all industrial. And as we've discussed amongst ourselves today, if that's the case, and if that's the only way that you see that land being utilized, it actually may not make any sense for us to even ask for it to be annexed. So as I'm sitting here, it doesn't make sense for, we haven't made that decision yet. We're going to be meeting Wednesday, but it's very possible that we could come to you guys and just rescind that annexation request. Because of how you've zoned it, it just doesn't make as much sense from an industrial standpoint as it would be necessary for residential. Wouldn't want you spending resources and money and time planning something that didn't make sense. And again, that's a response to the way that y'all have zoned it. A lot of this is dynamic, so y'all are making decisions and we have to make decisions, and we kind of have to do that maybe better together. So if that's a decision that y'all have made, I wasn't in on those meetings to where that was zoned as industrial, then that may be the direction we're going. The next question that I have is, as we've, as some of you know, we're also entering into a contract for land that is potentially more suitably oriented or located for development, both residential R1 and other uses. That is the Haroff land. And I don't know, in the way that y'all make decisions, if it would make sense for us to remove one annexation request and change it to another. If it made more sense for that parcel of land in terms of how it's geographically located for your services that you're providing. And I know that that's something that Mr. Jackson has always expressed a concern about, the west side and where the utilities would have to go through the city in order to be able to get to, you know, the wastewater facilities that you're building. So I don't really have an answer per se, but I couldn't sit there and not tell you the thought process we're going through as it's relating to West Dickinson, especially since you're spending resources and time to, you know, see what those costs might be. So just throwing that out there for you. I guess we'll talk more about it.
If I could.
Absolutely.
Mr. Moss, you know, I know the position that, I can imagine the position that you're in and other developers as well. But I think you're making our point. we have these decisions to make about which land's going to be annexed, which isn't. I wouldn't, even if our 2 months was up and we had the final scenario, I don't think I would entertain this west side annexation without knowing more about what your plans were for land use, having answers to infrastructure, and that's what we're trying to get. So I think you're making our point to
Oh,
wait
sure.
to
No, I don't blame you for
to get
how
some of
in your
those
shoes,
answers.
I would be doing the same thing.
And I think you're also making the point when you talk about another piece of ground that you might trade, so to speak. You know, we probably will have opinions about that, whether we think that's a good trade or not a good trade.
Yeah.
So again, I think you're making our point about.
Well, it's a dynamic situation that really is best done when everybody's working together, because it really, when I see a map that says, oh, what we were thinking of as being residential is now industrially zoned, that changes how we think. If that's what the city is going to impose on it, and I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, I totally understand that's y'all's right to do that, then it changes the direction that we need to go with that land.
I don't think it's been actually rezoned. There's a land use map, but it has
Okay.
not been rezoned.
Right. But, okay, so that just begs the question, is that the intent, where you see the best use for that land? I mean, assuming you labeled that for a reason, you labeled it through a thought process and thought that needs to be industrial, and given everything that we have going on and all the multiple thousands of homes that we have, identified as R1 in other parts of the city that make more sense, it doesn't make more sense for R1 to be there, so it's going to be industrial. And if I follow that logic, I couldn't disagree with you. It seems like that's a logical approach. And so if that's the case and it's industrial, it doesn't really benefit us to be annexed, with the kind of industrial that we can build. It would actually cost us more money and be more problematic if it's annexed. The main reason why we wanted it annexed is because we were thinking about it being residential. So, if that makes sense. Because the residential needs the water and sewer more so than the industrial use does, is the point of that. So, work in progress. But I just wanted to mention that to you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Mouse?
Just briefly, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, you've got a very competent staff, and they've met with us on some of these things. And the issue, it seems to me, is dynamic. And so the thing we would encourage you to consider is making this urban growth boundary flexible until, and so, in other words, we think this Haroff property makes more sense residentially. But if you set this urban growth outline without considering something that came in later, and there may be others, you may be making a decision that's not best for the city in the long run, making it more difficult for that to be part of the city. So you should have some flexibility going back to KLJ and say, look, this scenario A, we want that changed a little bit when you come back in and include this and don't include that. So that's what we encourage you to consider, is having some flexibility with these boundaries before they're set, instead of setting them and saying, okay, you can come back in 6 months and we'll tell you whether it's good or not good. If you think something right now might be better for the city, then you should have the right now to tell KLJ, change scenario A, B, or C before we finalize this. And that's what we would encourage you, because the Haroff property, which just recently potentially could be sold, is right west of this Coke Meadow Hills and makes a lot of sense residentially. But if you set the boundaries, that could all disappear. But if you tell KLJ now, change scenario A or B or C and include that, and we're hearing from Chase Merritt, you don't need to include this, before you get the final report, we just want to encourage you to consider that as a possible way of approaching this.
Mr. Mouse, I think what I heard Mr. Catan say, and Mr. Catan, you correct me if I'm wrong, but when KLJ comes back and they'll say, here's what the development cost is for A or B or C, the build-out costs, at that time, we're not just limited to picking from A, B, or C. We can pick, in a sense, either one of those and modify it.
That is correct, Mayor.
But once it goes into your comprehensive plan, then even though you can change it, it's actually an amendment to your comprehensive plan, and there's a little more formal process involved there?
Absolutely. I think you summarized it well. Per the direction of the commission from the last meeting, we got to start someplace, in order to come up with some basis to make decisions. And we've come up with the 3 different scenarios. To answer your question, I think that if we had all the annexations all at one time, we all looked at them holistically, and then if you chose to, let's say, scenario A, you thought that made the most sense, but there's an annexation adjoining it, and you wanted to include that within it, the modification to the models, to the modeling for that, it's not going to take another 2 or 3 months. They just reallocate the information. All we would need to do is we'd have to modify our contract because they are obligated to do three growth scenarios. And if we chose to modify, let's say, growth scenario A and include 300 acres to the north, let's say, I think if we were going to do that and you chose to do that, I think it would be on the proponents of the annexation to pay the difference with KLJ. I think that's a fair, a fair way instead of the city going back through that whole process in order to accommodate a particular individual. That's one way that could be addressed, and I think that's a fair way of doing it. But there are 3 growth scenarios to give you a general idea, to give you an idea with respect to the total infrastructure cost and land use allocations with that. You could either approve them in their entirety, or we could modify them accordingly, modify those boundaries if you chose to do so. It's just that if we do that, we'd have to do an amendment to the contract with KLJ.
Right. The land that Mr. Mouse is referring to is adjacent to what is now a preliminary urban service boundary and is not an extremely large tract of land.
320 acres.
Yeah.
And I think Chase Merritt would be willing to, following up on that suggestion, if there's additional cost to the KLJ contract for that, I think we could address that, take care of that.
I think the land you're talking about is outside the urban service.
Right, but adjacent to it.
Correct.
Yeah, I think we're talking about, right.
And to be fair, Mr. President, that, depending on if you modified the boundary, depending on how the future infrastructure would be to it, it may not be a significant cost differential of bringing infrastructure to there because we may have capacity for that, while going another scenario may be very costly to do so.
Just because we modify the boundary wouldn't obligate us to request from KLJ, tell us how much more it is to bring services there. I mean,
They could do that modification, they just need the information, the size, and the rest of the land use allocation for that, yes.
yeah. Now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
From what I'm hearing tonight, because we've got a common developer, would it be appropriate for Chase Merritt to write a letter to the city and say, please remove such and such a ground from scenario B or whatever it is, I don't know what it is, and instead include this other tract of land?
Well, that's, as the growth scenarios were approved by you as a commission. KLJ has started that process, but it hasn't went significantly in there. So if you as a commission wanted to change a boundary, let's say scenario B, which involved significantly the west side, and to include that, that would be, you would need to provide direction to KLJ, to staff, to direct KLJ to do the appropriate modifications for that. If that's where you are leaning, then I need direction as staff to let KLJ know that. These are your 3 scenarios. So if you feel that you want to modify them, modify one of them to trade one out and put another one on there, I have no objection to that. If you want to do that, we just need to know that as quickly as possible so KLJ doesn't spend a lot of money and then they need to come back with an amendment. If that's the case, then I think it's appropriate that the applicant need to pay for that portion. But that being said, you need to make a decision whenever you feel that you want to do that. Otherwise, I need to tell them to put it on hold. Or at least that scenario, put that scenario on hold, do the other 2. Do A and C.
I don't know how the others feel, but I don't, based on what I know today, I don't have much of an appetite for annexing this, what's labeled as the West Dickinson. I think there's a number of properties in there that I just soon not have in the city right now, and there's a number of owners in there that don't want to be in the city, and it's just going to be a big hassle.
Well, Mr. President, I would concur with that, because as staff, I would recommend denial as well.
I would just assume we don't even waste the time and money on that. It would make more sense over here in Northwest Dickinson that any of these properties that are adjacent to the urban boundary line, I think, make more sense for development. I actually think that if Dickinson becomes a much larger city, that really the Highway 10 corridor to South Hart is really going to be much more industrial, at least halfways to South Hart, to where the oil loading facility is, and if the refinery goes, I think it makes more sense that that's an industrial corridor and not a residential one.
Mr. President, just to add to what you have said, just for full disclosure purposes, I have spoken to other properties that are adjoining our boundaries, and they have the same concerns and desire to be included in as well. So I understand the desire, and it makes sense. It's contiguous to that, but there are other properties as well that would like to be considered.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we could take that off and just again that whole northwest area, if we were a little more generous there with the urban services boundary. Again, I don't know about the pipe in the ground and where it's at, but I mean, if you just look at the map, I think that's the direction Dickinson's going to grow residentially. I think Highway 10 could be more industrial, that corridor. I mean, how much more industrial is it going to be if you have a rail loading facility out there and a refinery?
I would concur with you.
So, do we have direction here? I mean, there was no request for motions or anything?
Not quite yet. I know.
Okay, Mr. Brian, go ahead.
My question would be on our Pinecrest annexation that we've submitted for, is in all three scenarios. Part of what I'm hearing with the 2-month issue is going to be, we're working on our retail corridor there. We're working with some retailers that are wanting to be moving faster than that. Because if we end up with a 2-month then, and then to go through the annexation process and the P&Z and all that, that basically dooms this year. So my question would be, similar to the Roars property that we just got annexed, ours is basically just us and in that area that's in the urban service boundary of all three scenarios. So my question would be, can we continue with our annexation and continue to move forward with that?
Mr. Cruton, you want to address that?
Sure. With respect to that, the Roars one, they're similar, but they're apples and oranges as well. Roars already has rezoning and final plat approval for that. Yours are in the elementary stages.
Mr. Cruton, one other big difference. We're talking about annexations, and then we're talking about an urban service boundary. One topic is what we might or might not include in the urban service boundary. The other is the annexation.
Correct.
And again, just because something, whether it's the Haroff property or any other property, is included in the urban service boundary does not guarantee it to be annexed. Correct?
That is correct. Each annexation comes on their own, they have to stand their own merits. Just to go back, just for clarification, you had said that you wanted to hold that, as a commission. Do you want to allow, now we're back again, do you want to allow one that's within all three scenarios to be able to proceed forward? Or do you want to hold that off, as Mr. Bachman has mentioned, that would that would significantly impact their development. So the question is today, you know, with respect to that one, do you want to hear them individually? Do you want to go across the board and say, we'll make a decision and allow them, or not allow any of them? That's the quandary as staff that I have.
Let me break in there. I think the way we feel is if they're clearly within all three scenarios and they're likely to happen, don't delay them just because of we're waiting for KLJ for 2 more months. On the other hand, if they're somewhat controversial, they're on the fringes or outside, or they're clearly not in all three scenarios, I think that's what we're saying is let's wait for the 2 weeks. The property he's talking about, when all's said and done, they're going to be within what KLJ will recommend and the commission will accept. I mean, I don't...
In all three.
Yeah. And he's talking about the land that's immediately north of the Roars land and adjacent to the route that's likely to be our, not the truck route, but the reliever route.
Correct.
And you're not talking further north than that or further west. So, I mean, there's no, that, I mean, to me, that's just common sense. You go ahead there. But if, you know, if Harris came in and said, we want to be annexed right now, we'd say, well, you're going to wait 2 months unless you make a decision to trade out this West Dickinson. Let's just not let KLJ waste their time on that, and you adjust the boundaries over here in the northwest corner and say, it's likely the commission's going to ask us to do that anyway, so let's do it on the front end rather than the back end. That's kind of where I think we're at, but...
I think you're right.
Yep.
And that makes perfect sense if it's in all three scenarios, to let them proceed forward when they get their title reports in order to move forward with that. And we've already spoke to Mr. Bachman about that. I guess the question then, if we're going to do the modification, or at least that's where the direction is from the board, ultimately a decision has to be made tonight with respect to the Haroff property. Do you want to be, in essence, the only scenario, if you're trading out one of the two, is really B.
Right.
So that would only be in one, so you would ask them to hold off for 2 months, but they would be factored in on one of the growth scenarios. That makes sense to me.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're in agreement?
Clear as mud.
Well, 'cause I was hoping to leave the meeting and have dinner as opposed to breakfast, but...
So we will proceed forward with that. I will contact KLJ, let them know the modify B, and include the Haroff property. I will talk to them with respect to things that needed to be done. Just to let the commission know, if that's the case, then that scenario B may be behind scenario A and C, because in order to do this, we needed a lot of land use issues, and I don't know if they've got to that point.
Okay. So that's it for tab 6. Tab 7 is city commission. Any city commission reports?
No.
Any